Good morning. Good morning, dear colleagues. Call for order. We will start in 20 seconds. So, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, Lord Speaker, we are now in our last day of the 29th annual session. And the draft agenda for this meeting has been distributed. And I would like to propose an amendment of the draft agenda, which is that after the address by Lord Speaker, we add the two items we did not reach yesterday, Helsinki plus 50 and the open general debate. Any objections? No, adopted. Thank you. And then I would like to remind all colleagues that the voting is underway for the positions of President and Vice President of the Assembly. In the foyer, on the floor above this hall. You will need to take your plenary voting card with you. Voting closes at 11 a.m. If you have any questions on the voting, please ask the OSCE PA Secretariat. And by this, I will go further on. And the second point on the agenda is the address by the Right Honourable the Lord McFall of Al-Clwyd, Lord Speaker. It's a true honour that you are here at our meeting today, Lord Speaker. And I am really honoured to invite you, Lord Speaker, to address OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. Yes, please.
Madam President, it is indeed an honour to be invited to address the 29th annual session of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly this morning. Birmingham is often described as the UK's second city. At the start of the conference, my friend and colleague Sir Lindsay Hoyle said that the second city is Manchester. Well, as a former MP for Dumbarton, adjacent to Glasgow, I will tell you for certain that the United Kingdom's second city is actually Glasgow, the Athens of the North, and I encourage you to visit it. In any event, it's still a pleasure for us to be hosting a major international parliamentary conference outside London. It is also great to be meeting each other again in person. A lot of progress has been made technologically during the pandemic, but I maintain that nothing will ever replace face-to-face engagement. When I stood for election last year as Speaker of the House of Lords, I was conscious that the role was strictly politically impartial. But there are some things about which we should not, indeed we must not, be neutral. We must be resolute in defending democratic values, the fundamental importance of human rights, and responding to acts of aggression. So I start my speech by joining others in condemning unreservedly Russia's brutal actions in Ukraine and expressing my solidarity and sympathy for the many personal tragedies that caused by them. The address by President Zelensky to the two houses of the United Kingdom Parliament in March was one of the most memorable events of my parliamentary career. His leadership is an example to us all. and I am pleased to see the members of the Ukrainian Parliament here and contributing so effectively to the work of this Assembly. I commend the work of the OSCE and this Assembly in seeking a resolution to this crisis and a constructive way forward. As you know well, our nations face ever-growing and even more complex security threats. These are set out in stark terms in reports such as the UK's integrated review from last year and the annual assessments from the US intelligence community. They include hostile state actors and the threat of conflict, risks to health and biosecurity, threats to food security, which we must remember go much wider than the current blockade of Ukraine, as serious as that is, climate change and environmental degradation, and organised crime, terrorism and cybercrime. These are naming just a few. There is a valuable recent analysis in the Financial Times which highlighted that we have a marked tendency to concentrate too much on authoritarian leaders and overmighty states. But in the long run, fragmentation, chaos, and ineffective government pose as great and possibly a greater risk to our collective security. These security challenges are interrelated, which makes the OSCE's comprehensive approach to security, covering political, military, economic, environmental, and human aspects, so important. So the work of international organisations such as the OSCE and this Assembly are essential in preserving and promoting a consistent, just framework for international relations. Parliaments can help to promote unity between democracies. On the domestic stage, I have convened an interparliamentary forum for the parliaments of the United Kingdom to come together on an equal footing. And parliaments can help ensure there is a comprehensive approach to international security, which I know is the approach taken by the OSCE and this Assembly. We can do this by examining and analysing the international security situation, by generating new ideas and approaches, and directly by forging stronger international connections between parliamentarians. Our expert committees can play a part of this work. As chair of the House of Commons Treasury Committee during the 2008-9 global financial crisis, I helped to extend the role and influence of our Westminster committees to scrutinise government policy and hold individuals to account. These parliamentary committees can speak with a credible, coherent, cross-party and unanimous voice. During that international crisis, the Treasury Committee acted as a bridge between the public and Parliament on one side and the authorities on the other. And the committee was instrumental, for example, in highlighting the importance of financial inclusion, as well as promoting initiatives to help shore up the soundness of the banking community. The public wanted answers. They needed to be on the political agenda, and we helped get them there. And as well as working to tackle current crisis, parliaments can take a longer-term view and help to focus attention on developing security threats before they hit the headlines. My own chamber, the House of Lords, uses its select committees to do this very effectively. And one of our newer committees on international relations and defence examined and produced a major and far-sighted report on Afghanistan in January 2021, several months before the violent return to power of the Taliban. Over the past year, that committee has also examined and reported on the law of the sea and maritime security and how international law needs to evolve to reflect changing realities and the UK's security and trade relationships with China. People ask me at various venues, what do I want the House of Lords to do? Quite simply, given the expertise and the skills and the institutional memory that's in the House of Lords. I want the House of Lords to be the best think tank in the country. We have that opportunity, and I want to develop that, reaching out to the public for greater understanding. Parliaments, though, must hold our governments to account, helping to test and improve our country's security policies and machinery. The UK Parliament's Joint Committee on the National Security Strategy does just that, including a major inquiry into biosecurity and the government's preparedness for major biological security risks. We have to keep in mind that they are coming, and we have to prepare for that, and we have to do it on a global chamber, in a global way. As Parliament's second chamber, the House of Lords as a whole takes its role very seriously in this respect. The actions of the UK government on security matters are regularly held up for questioning and scrutiny through debates and questions to ministers. And this role is helped by the unusual nature of our membership, which means we have amongst us unrivalled expert and authoritative figures, as I mentioned, including former Chiefs of the Defence Staff, Secretaries of State for Defence and Foreign Affairs, and past NATO Secretary-Generals. As the challenges we face become more complex and international, we must reassert the importance of international cooperation and reinvigorate multilateral structures. Just as we must each hold our own government to account, we must also continue to come together in forums such as these to scrutinise the work of our governments on the international stage. We must encourage and support the vital work done by organisations such as the OSCE in conflict prevention, combating modern slavery and against corruption. And by operating in an open, transparent way, our national parliaments and our inter-parliamentary organisations, we can help combat corruption and ensure good governance. When some societies are at risk of turning inwards, we must continue to look out. Madam President, I pay tribute here to the work of you, members of the Assembly. I hear regular updates about the work of the OSCE PA. I know the UK delegation work hard. I am sure that John Whittingdale will serve the Assembly well as Special Rapporteur on War Crimes in Ukraine. An important role at this time. And I thank Lord Dubs for his determined work, particularly on migration. 89 years of age and still going strong, still as inquisitive and still holding governments and organisations to account. What a tribute on that. We can only but hope ourselves. I pay tribute to Lord Bowness for his years of dedicated service to the Assembly, leading the UK delegation, but also serving as President from 2020 to 2021. His commitment to reform and progress will be his legacy. I know the UK delegation is not unique. It is the dedication of individual members and what 57 delegations can achieve by working together that makes this Assembly so powerful. That work needs coordination and leadership. And Madam President Margareta and Secretary-General Roberto and all of your team, we thank you for what you do and acknowledge the difference you make. At a time in our history when we are retreating from one another, rather than engaging and listening, this body has a unique opportunity and responsibility to be a beacon for mutual respect and cooperation. We are witnessing economic dislocation, potential global food shortages, rising inequality, and existential climate change crisis. The question for us all is, will our children and grandchildren look back on today as a time when we catastrophically abandoned even the pretense of internationalism, or one when we united to face the many geopolitical problems with determination and integrity? Madam President, I am confident that this body will rise to this challenge, and you have my gratitude and support as well as the UK Parliament, for that task. So many congratulations and best luck with your work in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lord Speaker. And now, if I may ask you to stay a little bit longer with the Assembly. Thank you so much, Lord Speaker. And I would like to ask our former colleague, Lord Bowness, to come up to the podium. Is Lord Bowness? Yeah, he's coming. Thank you so much. Dear colleagues, it's a true honor to have Lord Bowness here. Lord Bowness has served the Assembly for a very long time. Head of the UK delegation, Vice President, President, but also Chair of the Committee on Rules of Procedure, as well as always chairing the drafting committee for our annual session. Your contribution to the Assembly have been outstanding, Lord Bowness. And I am really, really honored to have had you as a colleague for such a long time, and also as a role model for what does it mean to be a member of OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, to hold our commitments high and always, always stand very firm to the commitments and know why are we here, what is our duties. Thank you so much, Lord Bowness, for everything you have done here. I wish you all the best for the future.
Yeah, okay. Madam President, Mr. Secretary General, Lord Speaker, can I thank the Assembly for the invitation to attend this 29th annual session, particularly because it gives me the opportunity to recognise personally those friends and colleagues amongst both the members of the delegation and the International Secretariat for the friendship and cooperation that I received over some 16 years. Now, Madam President, I know that the best thing I can do for you this morning is give you the time to get on with the outstanding debate. And therefore, I shall not share a lot of thoughts with you, only to say this. Thank you all, and I wish members and the Secretariat well for the future and the work that you're going to be doing in difficult times. And I'm sure that you will achieve this with a close working together of the two arms of the Assembly. Thank you again, colleagues, friends, members. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, President Bowness. As a sign of appreciation also from the Secretariat and from the President, we have prepared for you a little booklet which contains all your activities in the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. As you can see, it's a very thick book of your press releases and all your activities. And the President also underlined your role in the Rules Committee. I must say you were very much missed yesterday. We could have used some of your deep knowledge of our rules. But thank you very much. And Madam President, maybe you want to...
Okay. Yes, thank you. Here is a certificate of appreciation. And thank you once again, Lord Bowness.
Thank you very much. That's very kind. It's very sweet of you. Very nice of you, Roberto. Thank you very much. Okay. Take care.
Dear colleague, we will now take a very, very short break. Don't leave the room, please. We will start in 1 or 2 minutes. Thank you. Call for order. Please take your seat, dear colleagues. We will start in 5 seconds. Next item of our agenda is number 3, call for action, Helsinki +50 initiative. I will give the floor to Ambassador Sanier to update us on the call for action initiative. After that, I will open the floor for questions if there is any. And after that, it's the open general debate. Ambassador Sanier, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam President, dear distinguished members of the Parliamentary Assembly. As you know, this project was initiated in 2020 by President Tsereteli and Secretary General Montella. It was endorsed by the past leaders of the CSE and the OSCE through their call for action. It was continued first by Lord Bowness and over the past year under the leadership of President Sederfeld, who formally chaired all the meetings. The meetings were held online and were open to participation by all interested members of this Parliamentary Assembly. Since my report at the winter session, we held in early March, as you heard yesterday from Vice President Shakirov, an event devoted to discussing the role of the OSCE in supporting the UN from a regional perspective in the implementation of the Sustainable Development Agenda. After that, we discontinued our planned sequence of regular meetings and refocused our discussions on the consequences of the war in Ukraine and the OSCE role in this regard. We held 3 meetings in the subsequent months, recording every time a very significant level of attendance and engagement by OSCE parliamentarians. The first of these meetings focused primarily on the role of OSCE institutions and their current and planned activities. The second was devoted to looking at the impact on civilians, including the humanitarian situation and the situation of refugees and IDPs. And in the third one, we reviewed the recent developments on the ground and cast a look ahead to deliberate on prospects for peace and the future role of the OSCE in this challenging environment in Ukraine. After the summer break, while of course the focus on Ukraine will continue as necessary, we will also begin a more focused discussion on the future role and effectiveness of the OSCE more broadly in the new, more complex and confrontational European security environment in light of the war in Ukraine. And of course, all this on the horizon of the 50th anniversary of the Helsinki Final Act in 2025. The initial event in this phase will take place with the participation of the enlarged Bureau in Helsinki on the 23rd of September. And at this meeting, we expect to put the key issues for this phase of discussion into focus. We are then planning a second event back-to-back with the fall meeting of this Parliamentary Assembly in Sofia in October, a meeting to which you will all be invited. We are then considering further events in Ashgabat and Baku on topics which, however, will be decided in light of developments. A group of friends has been established to assist the Finnish hosts in the preparation for the Helsinki event, but also to provide advice on the long-term agenda of the process. This group of friends has already met twice and will continue to meet periodically as required. The Bureau and the Standing Committee will be kept informed so that they can provide guidance on the building blocks of this discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Sanier. And now I will open the floor for comments and questions. I will first give the floor to Head of the Finnish delegation, Mr. Wilhelm Junnila. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Madam President, Lord Speaker, in late 2020, our Assembly decided to make an active contribution in the discussion about the challenges that the OSCE is facing. For this purpose, the Assembly launched the Call for Action Helsinki +50 initiative. As you know, many dramatic events have taken place after that, and I'm not referring to yesterday's early vote in rule debate. The Russian aggression against Ukraine and Russia's violation of the OSCE and the UN commitments and principles have further underlined the need to not only discuss, but also to act, and finally take concrete steps to strengthen our organization. In the present situation, the Assembly wishes to play an important role, and for this, we should be able to make concrete and realistic propositions. A steering group called the Group of Friends was established to advise and provide suggestions for the Call for Action initiative. As we are still in the initial phase of the process, members of the enlarged Bureau and the steering group are looking to gather in Helsinki for an in-person seminar linked to the initiative. We also need to analyze the situation as it is, and we need to involve all delegations in the process. I therefore welcome the opportunity to hear your views and ideas on how to continue. The title of the Call for Action Helsinki +50 seminar is ambitious: the role of the OSCE PA in the new European security environment. The role of the Parliamentary Assembly is obviously linked to the role of the OSCE as a whole. The OSCE mission and its structure remain the same, and the various tools still exist. However, commitments of the participating states to the common principles of security agreed in 1975 have been seriously violated. Changes in the security environment have already affected the possibilities and perspectives for the work of the OSCE, both at the intergovernmental level and at the parliamentary level. As you know, the dialogue inside the organization between the intergovernmental and the parliamentary bodies is weak at best and non-existent at worst. As it stands, there are many issues that need to be discussed. First, how should the decision-making process in the OSCE be developed with a view to reinforcing the impact and overall effectiveness of the organization as a whole? Second, how should the institutional dialogue and the interaction between the Parliamentary Assembly and the intergovernmental structures of the OSCE be reformed with a view to strengthening the role and contribution and the overall effectiveness of the OSCE? What are the most urgent needs with respect to the rules of procedures of the Assembly. Third, the OSCE has developed various mechanisms in this intergovernmental level. In what way should the Assembly develop and promote its own mechanism for the prevention and resolution of conflicts? Fourth, election observation missions have since the beginning been one of the most successful operative activities of the Assembly. In addition to election observation, how could the Assembly support democratic institutions and parliamentarism? And last but not least, in view of the ongoing conflicts and the war in Ukraine, what are the lessons learned and what are the most urgent needs for reform? We have a lot to discuss. I look forward with interest to our discussions. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Wilhelm Junnila. And next speaker on my list is Mr. Mark Pritchard from United Kingdom. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Madam President, and I'd like to thank Finland for this important initiative and for hosting and chairing the Group of Friends Helsinki Plus 50 process as we all work towards the 50th anniversary of the Helsinki Final Act. And in particular, I'd like to thank Wilhelm, we've just heard from, and Ambassador Zanier, who we've just heard from, and Pierre, who's done so much work to coordinate this excellent initiative. Now, the call for action, a forward-looking process, is very much needed as the OSCE permanent missions, field missions, and this Assembly seek to respond in a measured, thoughtful, and hopefully proportionate response to the new and developing security and diplomatic challenges to the OSCE and its member states. And this process should seek to strengthen existing OSCE structures, rather than to rewrite their founding principles or undo many of the good things the OSCE continues to do. This process needs to protect and strengthen, not dismantle the current European security architecture. We need to underline and stand up for the international rule of law, human rights, and democracy, and ensure that we have a strong peace through a strong defense. And that must be the central core that binds the OSCE together, as well as diplomacy, de-escalation, and dialogue. But dialogue with meaning, purpose, and resolve, not dialogue that will give any succor or any sign of weakness of this organization to this organization's adversaries and those that would seek to undermine its principles and values and practices. But again, thank you to Finland. Thank you for this initiative.
Thank you, Mr. Mark Pritchard. And by this, can I close call for action number 3? Yes, closed. And now, dear colleagues, I open the general debate. And I should announce the number. 40. I have 40 speakers on the list. And the speaking time is limited to 2 minutes. I now call on Mr. Michael George Link from Germany. The floor is yours, sir. He will be followed by Mr. Michael Mills from United Kingdom. Mr. Michael George Link, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you very much also for the honor to opening this open debate. Let me say very clearly also on behalf of Germany, we very, very clearly stand behind Ukraine. When we met last time, the Standing Committee, in person, by the way, in Vienna, we met in this darkest hour of Europe in this 21st century. It was the darkest hour, and therefore we clearly stand behind Ukraine. To win this war, the aggressor must be defeated. And we clearly want to, therefore, also after we heard in Helsinki Plus 50 that there are so many threats, I want on behalf of our delegation, to mention a very important elephant in the room, and that is China. We have a very important declaration signed by China and Russia in the wake of the Olympics on February 4th. It's really worth reading, where they try to reinterpret the very notion of democracy and human rights, where they try to give their own meaning and interpretation of what is democracy and what is human rights. But dear colleagues, we have a valid interpretation in the OSCE and CSCE founding principles, in the Helsinki Act, in the Paris Charter, in the Copenhagen document. Let us not destroy what we have. Let us remind all those who signed it that this is valid and binding, and let us not lose also this war of narratives and systemic rivalry, where especially China tries to interfere in the OSCE area. Therefore, dear colleagues, that is what I want to say very clearly. Let us also have a close watch on what is happening around us, and let me remind you, also already as early in the very Decalogue, we had the notion that every individual should be able to know its rights and to act upon its rights. That is exactly what we are standing for. Let us not destroy that. Let us defend it in the face of increasing dictatorial ambitions, also from outside the OSCE area, and let us keep a close eye on what is China doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Michael George Link. Next speaker on my list is Mr. Nigel Mills from United Kingdom. He will be followed by Mr. Pierre Joan Pons from Spain. Mr. Nigel Mills, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. It's a pleasure to address the Assembly, my third plenary. I remember my first plenary in Berlin, and I confess I had little idea what the OSCE was or stood for or what the point was, and I almost wondered yesterday afternoon if I still knew. But I think in these incredibly difficult and dangerous times in Europe, the OSCE has a unique place, a unique position, an important one, where the values of democracy, freedom, the rule of law, human rights have probably not been under such threat in Europe in my lifetime. And we have a real chance, I think, to project those values in this most difficult time, and we can offer a choice to countries, some in the OSCE and some further around the world, whether they want to be a part of the rule of law, free democracies with open societies, or whether they want to go down the line of the Russia-China authoritarian, corrupt, violent access. And I think that is where the international community needs to go now. We sadly, and I hope people will pull back from the brink of this, but we are not where we all hoped we would be 10, 20 years ago. The world is almost dividing before our eyes, and we need to reiterate those real values that the OSCE have and show that they are the right way forward, and we shouldn't be tempted by the ease of dodgy, cheap money and authoritarian regimes. So I would urge the President, the Vice Presidents, the Special Representative to spend the next year and really reinvigorate the organisation and really take that message out around our area and further around the world, that all those values that we hold dear are the right ones. And really, I think we should give a real priority to tackling the corrupt money flows that have enabled much of the situation that we've found ourselves in. And we in the UK must and need to take a lead. We have enjoyed far too much the dirty money that's flown easily. And that, I think, should be a real priority for the OSCE to expose that and stamp it out as fast as we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nigel Mills. Next speaker on my list is Mr. Pierre Joan Pons from Spain. He will be followed by Mr. Gürsel Tekin from Turkey. Mr. Pierre Joan Pons, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. President, and I'm going to shift in Spanish. I'm going to speak in Spanish. Muy brevemente, algunos puntos. La primera es que creo que es muy importante, muy relevante que estamos en esta asamblea entre dos grandes ejes, ¿no? Por un lado, estamos reconfigurando el nuevo orden mundial. Estamos al final de una semana en la que la Unión Europea ha dado el ok a la candidatura de Ucrania y Moldavia como países candidatos. Yo creo que nos tenemos que felicitar. Se ha producido el G7, se ha producido la cumbre de la OTAN con la petición de adhesión de Finlandia y Suecia. Estamos construyendo un nuevo orden mundial dentro de una, yo creo que todos coincidimos, una condena a esa agresión que ha hecho Rusia, ¿no? Y al final de todos estos elementos, de estos últimos meses, pues también se produce esta asamblea parlamentaria con 323 parlamentarios y parlamentarias que tienen que ser pues, una expresión de la fuerza del diálogo, ¿no? Y eso al mismo tiempo se produce en un momento de recuperación y tensión económica. Por una parte hay externalidades positivas, hay algunos países que crecen, pero también hay una situación inflacionaria, lo hemos dicho en algunas de las reuniones. La inflación es el peor indicador o el mejor indicador para ver la desigualdad, que eso todos los retos, ¿no? Segundo punto que me gustaría decir es que de este momento se deduce que estamos en una situación de riesgo para las democracias. Es decir, estamos hablando de la agresión rusa, pero sobre todo estamos hablando también de la fragilidad de nuestras democracias. Quería compartir con ustedes que cuando estuve en Kiev me entristeció todo mucho, pero también me entristeció ver a un parlamento bunkerizado. Cuando ves un parlamento bunkerizado es porque realmente está en riesgo también la democracia. Lo estuvimos hablando con el señor Stefanchuk. Y querría terminar diciendo que esta asamblea parlamentaria, su fuerza, su mayor capacidad es el diálogo. Y, por tanto, invito a todos a reflexionar, aparte de condenar y de criticar, que todos estamos de acuerdo, pero tenemos que buscar vías para ver cuál es nuestro valor añadido como fuerza de diálogo, porque como parlamentarios lo que va a hacer y lo que puede provocar cambios es eso, dialogar incluso con los que no están de acuerdo con nosotros. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you. Next speaker on my list is Mr. Gürsel Tekin from Turkey. He will be followed by Ms. Kari Henriksson from Norway. Mr. Gürsel Tekin, the floor is yours.
Sayın Başkan, Rusya Federasyonu'nun Ukrayna'ya karşı başlattığı hukuk dışı savaş, Avrupa güvenlik mimarisine ve AGİT'e büyük zarar verdi. Ukrayna'nın toprak bütünlüğü ve egemenliği çerçevesinde çözüm için diplomasi kanalının açık tutulması gerekmektedir.
Madam President,
tüm bu tarafların masada olduğu kapsayıcı temel platform olarak kalmaya devam etmelidir.
Madam President, distinguished colleagues, the unlawful war launched by the Russian Federation against Ukraine has greatly damaged the European security architecture and the OSCE. The diplomatic channels, though, should be kept open for a solution that respects Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty. The OSCE must remain the core inclusive platform where all parties are at the negotiation table.
Türkiye, Gürcistan, Moldova'nın egemenliğini ve toprak bütünlüğü de güçlü bir şekilde desteklemektedir. Buradaki ihtilafların barışçıl, kapsamlı ve sürdürülebilir bir çözüme ulaşması yönünde çabaları önem atfediyoruz.
Turkey strongly supports the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Georgia and Moldova. Any efforts to reach a peaceful, comprehensive and sustainable resolution of conflicts in the region are immensely important for us.
Güney Kafkasya'da kalıcı bir barış ve istikrara ulaşmak için ortaya bir fırsat çıkmıştır. Azerbaycan ve Ermenistan arasında bu yönde devam eden görüşmeleri memnuniyetle karşılıyoruz. Aynı şekilde Türkiye ve Ermenistan arasında da normalleşme süreci başladı. Karşılıklı olarak atanan özel temsilcilerimiz şimdiye kadar 4 kez bir araya geldi. Güney Kafkasya'nın kalıcı barış ve istikrar havzasına dönüşmesini istiyoruz. Tüm devletler bu süreci desteklemeye devam etmeli.
An opportunity has presented itself to achieve a lasting peace and stability in the Southern Caucasus. We welcome the ongoing talks between Azerbaijan and Armenia in this direction. Likewise, a normalization process began between Turkey and Armenia. Our mutually appointed special representatives have met 4 times so far. We want the South Caucasus to turn into a basin of permanent peace and stability. We invite all states to support this process.
Türkiye, Ege ve Doğu
Thank you.
Akdeniz'de
Speaking time starts to run out, but please conclude this sentence. Thank you.
Türkiye ve Ege Doğu Akdeniz'de huzur ve kalıcı barış istenmektedir. Bununla birlikte karasuları, kıta sahaları ve hava sahaları egemenlik haklarımızda vazgeçmememizi kimse beklememelidir. Doğu ve Ege adalarının askerleştirilmesi 1923 Lozan ve 1947 Paris anlaşmalarına aykırıdır. Uluslararası hukukun açık ihlalidir. Biz tüm meseleleri diyalog ve işbirliği yoluyla çözmek istiyoruz. Muhataplarımızla dürüst ve samimi diyalog çağrısında bulunuyoruz. Teşekkür ederim.
Turkey also wants tranquility and a lasting peace in the Aegean and Eastern Mediterranean. However, no one should expect us to renounce our sovereign rights over our territorial waters, continental shelf and airspace. The militarization of the Eastern Aegean Islands is against the 1923 Lausanne Agreement and 1947 Paris Agreement. It's a clear violation of international law. We want to resolve all issues through dialogue and cooperation. We also call for an honest and sincere dialogue with our interlocutors. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gürsel Tekin. Next speaker on my list is Ms. Kari Henriksen from Norway. She will be followed by Mr. Roger Pedreni Carmona from Andorra. Ms. Kari Henriksen, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and dear colleagues. In my time as OSCE EPA delegate, I have met people around the region that worry about their future. People fearful of repression, lack of democracy, terror, discrimination, and pandemic, and no war. Today, we are witnessing an aggressive, brutal war in Europe with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Let me make 3 points. The main task for the Assembly now is to work for an end to Ukrainian suffering and stop the war. This was underlined in the compromise supplementary item we agreed on Saturday. I fully subscribe to it. Second, we must work closely with the OSCE to help re-establish work on the ground in Ukraine, ensure that the country is being rebuilt and that its sovereignty is being respected. Third, we mustn't forget the other conflicts in the OSCE region. There is still suppression, discrimination, and unjust and illegal arrests and detention of people. But we must be prepared to other future challenges. We face a situation which could easily lead to further conflicts. Energy and food supply crisis, increased migration, and political leadership that are suppressing democratic institutions and breaking international commitments. Mr. Link mentioned China. The international politics are floating. Now new positions are made. The situation also calls for stronger commitment on gender equality policy. Women must, for instance, play a stronger role in the peace negotiation. It also calls us to strengthen the work for a free press, remove hate speech, and strengthen political protection of minorities. Colleagues, we as an organization should build bridges and not widen gaps. And at last but not least, I would urge all of us to uphold our financial commitments to the organization and international institutions in general. International crises need international solutions, and we are a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kari Henriksen. Next speaker is Mr. Roger Pedreni Carmona from Andorra. He will be followed by Ms. Helga Vala Helgasdottir from Iceland. Mr. Roger Pedreni Carmona, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to highlight, firstly, an important issue relevant to the OCPA. The Declaration of Birmingham will establish and recommend the integration of the network of young parliamentarians within the OCPA. Andorra devotes utmost importance to OCE events and to the participation of young people in these events. Hence today, I take the opportunity to inform my esteemed parliamentarian colleagues about the establishment of the informal network of young parliamentarians at the adoption in Andorra last 2nd of July of the joint declaration on promotion of youth participation in the OC area, a statement of young parliamentarians of the OCPA. By gathering the youngest members of our Assembly, we hope that this initiative will help us to make sure that we successfully engage with youth and for youth, and that the voices of young people are heard in the OCPA. Indeed, it's of utmost importance that we, as parliamentarians, act as active promoters of youth participation, especially within the OCPA, an ideal platform for the exchange of opinions and dialogue. Constructive actions have been undertaken, and I welcome the work and support that Ms. Karimi, Special Representative on Youth Engagement, provided during the past year. The evolution of the work of the CPA on youth is encouraging, but we still remain concerned by the lack of participation of our youngest colleagues in plenary sessions and committees. Those are steps taken in the right direction, and we should continue engaging with the young parliamentarians acting at our national level to reach more positive results and impacts. The current crisis, conflicts, pandemic, environment have highlighted that youth have a key role in implementing lasting peace, involving them in decision-making processes that will bring lasting benefits for our population and for our Assembly. We need youth perspective in this Assembly. I'm looking forward to working closely with other colleagues in the future to strengthen the activities of the informal network of young parliamentarians, and I invite every young colleague to join us in this regard. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Rodger Padrini Carmona. Next speaker on my list is Ms. Helga Vala Helgasdottir from Iceland. She will be followed by Mr. Jan Bauer from Czech Republic. And the table will now be led for a short time by Vice President Christian Viginen. Ms. Helga Vala Helgasdottir, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Madam President, dear colleagues, I want to start by thanking the host for the hospitality we have enjoyed here in Birmingham. It has been a pleasure working at the OSCE Parliament Assembly and also been heartwarming to witness the solidarity of all our members with the nation of Ukraine. Being united in condemning the brutality of the Russian army in Ukraine makes the OSCE community stronger. We all stand with Ukraine. But while the world is focused on the war in Ukraine, the US Supreme Court has removed the constitutional right to abortion, overturning a legal precedent made almost half a century ago in the case of Roe versus Wade. How could that happen in the year 2022, that the human rights of pregnant girls and women are restricted? The United States used to be a frontrunner in the protection of human rights, but today, not for pregnant women, only for others. Where is the human rights protection for the 10-year-old girl, a rape victim that bears the perpetrator's sin in her womb? Why is the US judicial system now forcing the child to go through the horror of carrying her perpetrator's offspring only to give it away to a foster home? That is, if her young body survives the ordeal of pregnancy and childbirth. Every year, more than 120,000 children are awaiting adoption in the United States. And it's not only this little girl that was on the front page of a US newspaper this week who is suffering. Also the mother of 4 without a job. Also a junk addict that didn't have a clue about her pregnancy and doesn't know who the father is. Also the typical woman in a stable relationship and secure employment that simply does not wish to carry her pregnancy to term. Their rights to their own body are fundamental. Dear colleagues, I urge you all to protect the human rights of every woman, making sure they have their rights to decide over their own bodies. Abortion rights are fundamental human rights for women. No judge is allowed to withdraw that right while the world is looking in another direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Helgasdottir. Now Jan Bauer from Czech Republic has the floor, followed by Nicolo Samkaradze. Please, Mr. Bauer.
Thank you for the floor, Mr. Vice Chair, dear colleagues. First of all, let me extend my warm thanks to our UK host for the excellent organization. As you surely know, a few days ago, on the 1st of July, the Czech Republic became the presiding country of the Council of the European Union. And we have taken over the European presidency from France in extremely difficult times. On the 24th of February this year, the world changed completely. On this day, the Russian aggression in Ukraine has begun. And the Russian aggression and its consequences has also been the main theme or agenda of our discussion and draft resolution here in Birmingham. The Czech Republic, along with many other countries, has been helping Ukraine since then. After all, the Czechs and Slovaks remember very well the violent military aggression against our own country in 1968, led by the former Soviet Union. We have been helping Ukraine financially and by supplying humanitarian and also military aid. During the 4 months of the war, almost 400,000 war refugees, mainly women and children, were granted temporary protection status in the Czech Republic. Considering the size of our country and its population of 10 million inhabitants, this is a huge number. Dear Madam, dear colleagues, I would like to assure you that during the Czech presidency, which will focus on energy security, strengthening Europe's defense capabilities and cybersecurity, strategic resilience of the European economy and democratic institution, the extremely important agenda of managing the refugee crisis and Ukraine's post-war recovery will be our top priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Bauer. Now I give the floor to Nikolo Samkaradze from Georgia, followed by Wilhelm Junila from Finland. Please, Mr. Samkaradze.
Thank you, Chair. The past 2 decades represent one of the most dramatic shifts in the security and political environment in Europe. The advent of the Russian aggression against Georgia and now Ukraine has blatantly violated the fundamentals of international law. However, 2022 has become a year when the OSCE region was shaken by the outbreak of the largest military invasion since the World War II. In Ukraine, in the very heart of Europe, we have been observing the absolute disregard for human life, human dignity, and ignorance of the principles of territorial integrity, sovereignty, inviolability of borders, and political independence for the last 4 months. Of course, this unlawful reality is incompatible with the ideas and fundamental principles of the OSCE. We, as the elected representatives of our peoples, must guard democracy, international law, and the principles of OSCE, unanimously urge the Russian Federation to cease all military hostilities in Ukraine, and we must maintain pressure on Moscow until the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine and Georgia is fully restored, as well as the systematic infringement of human rights are brought to an end in the occupied areas. However, it is clear that standing in solidarity with these countries and addressing the current leadership in Moscow with resolutions and declarations is not enough. We need brave and concrete decisions. We see the solution in NATO and the EU enlargement, which can play a powerful role in guaranteeing peace and security in our regions. Of course, we are glad that the EU has made a historical decision and granted the European perspective to Georgia, Ukraine, and Moldova. I would like to ask again representatives of every EU and NATO member state that is attending the annual session right now to fully support our Euro-Atlantic integration path, because if Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine will not be parts of Western alliances, they will be swallowed by the new Russian Empire. It's a life and death struggle for each of us, and we need maximum support from your side. We are also motivated to facilitate peace dialogue in the South Caucasus. In this regard, we are happy to host our Armenian and Azerbaijani friends in Tbilisi to discuss stability and development of our region in a trilateral format. We also welcome the start of the normalization dialogue between Turkey and Armenia, and we offer our support to our friends to bring this dialogue forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Samkaradze. And now I give the floor actually to Mr. Koskinen from Finland, followed by Daniel Fessler from Switzerland. Please, Mr. Koskinen.
Thank you, President. During a disastrous war, our task is to concentrate in stopping the attack, starting peace building, and restoring justice. Our declaration and resolutions include important messages to governments, parliaments, and individuals as well to this direction. But one important aspect is missing. I think we should already focus the OSCE and other interparliamentarian activities towards complementing the international law. The damages caused by Russian invasion in Ukraine are enormous. Estimated recovery needs are over 600 billion euros and increasing every day and hour. We have to find creative solutions to make make the principle aggressor must pay reality. The OSCE could follow the paths which are being explored in the EU, Canada, and the US. Confiscating assets of an aggressor state should be part of just and preventive international law. Frozen and seized assets could be then authorized to compensate war victims, reconstruction, and nation building. We are defending democracy, peace, and the global rules-based system. This includes holding the aggressor, in this case Russia, to account both legally and financially for the human and economic toll of its war. This should be an item in our next assembly meetings, as well as drafting projects together with other international organizations and national legislators, aiming at upgrading our international legal system. And in our assembly, we could gather the political will among parliamentarians towards this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Koskinen. Now I give the floor to Daniel Fessler from Switzerland, followed by Azay Guliev from Azerbaijan. Please, Mr. Fessler, you have the floor.
Dear Chair, dear colleagues, Anfang dieser Woche hat in der Schweiz in Lugano eine internationale Konferenz für den Wiederaufbau der Ukraine stattgefunden. Während 2 Tagen haben die Delegierten aus der Ukraine mit zahlreichen internationalen Partnern über den Wiederaufbau ihres Landes diskutiert. Auch der Kampf gegen Korruption und künftige Reformen waren ein Thema. Die Konferenz in Lugano war als 5. Reformkonferenz für die Ukraine geplant. Nun wurde sie zur ersten Wiederaufbaukonferenz. Der Anlass für die Änderung von Name und Konzept ist traurig und nicht nachvollziehbar, aber leider wahr. Der am 24. Februar gestartete, brutale und mit nichts zu rechtfertigende Angriffskrieg von Russland gegen die Ukraine und das ukrainische Volk hat alles verändert, in der Ukraine, aber auch in der europäischen Sicherheitsarchitektur. Die Konferenz in der Schweiz wurde zu einem internationalen Startschuss für den Wiederaufbauprozess in der Ukraine. Delegationen aus rund 40 Staaten und mehr als ein Dutzend internationaler Organisationen nahmen daran teil. Die Delegation der Ukraine bestand aus rund 100 Personen und wurde vom ukrainischen Premierminister Denis Schmihal angeführt. Zu den ukrainischen Delegierten gehörten viele Parlamentarier. Das ist wichtig, denn auch wir Parlamentarierinnen und Parlamentarier müssen unsere Verantwortung wahrnehmen und eine entscheidende Rolle im Wiederaufbauprozess einnehmen. Angesichts der dramatischen Umstände in der Ukraine wollten die Regierungen der Ukraine und der Schweiz mit der internationalen Konferenz auch ein Zeichen der Hoffnung setzen für das ukrainische Volk, für die politisch Verantwortlichen und für das ukrainische Militär, dessen Tapferkeit und Durchhaltewillen unseren ganzen Respekt verdient. It's important that we give hope every day and work together to ensure a prosperous and safe future for all Ukrainians in a free and democratic Ukraine. We must never give up the belief in a peaceful future for Ukraine and for all of Europe. We must work for this future without interruption and without hesitation. That was the spirit of the Lugano Conference in Switzerland, and that must be the guiding principle of all our further work. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Daniel Fessler. Next speaker on my list is Mr. Azay Guliev, Azerbaijan, followed by Mr. Malik Ben Archer, Belgium. Mr. Azay Guliev, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. First of all, let me thank all those parliamentarians who yesterday voted against one-sided and counterproductive amendments related to Armenia-Azerbaijan relations. Dear colleagues, you did much more than simply defeat these confrontational amendments. You voted in favor of normalization process between Armenia and Azerbaijan. You choose to support confidence building and resolving all issues peacefully through direct talks. You reaffirmed the commitment of our Assembly to building sustainable peace in the South Caucasus region. And you refuse to jeopardize this sensitive yet essential process that has no alternative. Common sense and adherence to our shared fundamental principles and commitments prevailed. And I thank you for that. I would also like to turn to Armenian delegation, who continued its inflammatory rhetoric and non-constructive approach in the past few days. Azerbaijan undertakes consistent efforts for opening up a new page in our relations, however difficult it might be. It is expressed both in our words and deeds, including in 5 well-known basic principles that we presented. Our purpose is clear: making regional peace and security irreversible. Armenia, if it is really interested in normalization process and the Brussels peace agenda, should read in the right way the signals sent by our Assembly and take necessary result-oriented steps for attaining durable peace in the region. Dear colleagues, in conclusion, I would like to thank the Assembly for electing me the chair of the Economic Committee. The second dimension has untapped potential for fostering security and cooperation in the region. I will spare no effort in promoting and utilizing these opportunities. So thank you for your trust and confidence. I am looking forward to close working with all of you. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Gulbiev. Next speaker on my list is Mr. Malik Ben Achor from Belgium. He will be followed by Ms. Leah Gassan from Canada. Mr. Malik Ben Achor, the floor is yours.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Alors, la guerre russe lancée contre la souveraineté de l'Ukraine et contre son peuple est une guerre contre la liberté. Elle est l'expression d'un impérialisme de revanche, qui est la manifestation brutale et impitoyable d'un paradigme politique puissant, un paradigme illibéral, ethno-nationaliste, identitaire, tourné contre la démocratie et ses principes. Pour Poutine, les principes démocratiques sont un poison mortel. La guerre, le viol, l'assassinat de civils, l'emprisonnement d'opposants politiques, le meurtre de journalistes sont les remèdes ou le vaccin. Et cette guerre nous donne l'impression, qui est vraie, qui est légitime, que le monde se partage entre le monde libre, éternel, et ses ennemis incarnés notamment par la Russie de Poutine. Alors ceci est vrai, mais ce n'est pas suffisant. Aujourd'hui, la démocratie fait aussi face à une menace intérieure. Et la résistance, nous devons aussi la mener contre la tentation antidémocratique qui grandit en notre sein. Quelques réflexions. 1. La démocratie s'affaiblit si elle tolère les doubles standards, les logiques de 2 poids, 2 mesures. Nous avons rendu un hommage fort, légitime, aux journalistes tués sur le front ukrainien. Mais il y a quelques semaines, une journaliste américano-palestinienne a été assassinée par les forces spéciales israéliennes dans un contexte de violation grave et répétée des droits humains. La posture des pays membres de cette organisation, dans l'espace de l'OSCE comme en dehors, ne doit souffrir d'aucune incohérence et les alliances politiques ne doivent jamais l'emporter sur la défense des principes. 2. Au sein de l'espace de l'OSCE, les droits des femmes sont mis gravement et concrètement en danger. Des reculs majeurs de ces droits sont organisés avec succès et je voudrais dire Women's rights are human rights. Les droits des femmes sont des droits humains et face à ces attaques en règle, face à ces attaques brutales et injustes, attaques conservatrices, il est urgent de consacrer dans nos constitutions les droits des femmes à disposer de leur corps. Nos démocraties doivent aussi être pleinement conscientes que ces attaques conservatrices et réactionnaires se nourrissent de discours s'appuyant sur la religion, ce qui appelle à renforcer le caractère séculier de nos démocraties. Dernier point, j'en termine là-bas, Madame la Présidente. Je ne serai pas très long parce que ça a déjà été évoqué ces derniers jours. Je tiens simplement à souligner l'importance vitale de lutter contre la production et la diffusion de fake news qui minent la crédibilité de la démocratie. C'est un sujet important qui souligne un phénomène inquiétant qui, d'une certaine manière, relève aussi de la responsabilité individuelle de chacun d'entre nous, élus dans la manière dont nous faisons de la politique. Ce phénomène, l'affaiblissement, la dissolution de la notion de vérité, de science dans le débat public, nous ne parviendrons à lutter contre les fake news que si nous réhabilitons dans notre pratique politique l'idée de vérité. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Mr. Malik Ben Achor. Next speaker on my list is Ms. Leah Gassan from Canada. She will be followed by Mr. Mikita Potorayev, Ukraine. Ms. Lea Gassan, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Madam President, colleagues, I wish to draw the OSCE PA Assembly's attention to troubling developments with participating states limiting and in some cases criminalizing the reproductive health rights of women, girls, and diverse gendered individuals. Canada, as one of the signatories of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, has international legal obligations to protect, respect, and promote the reproductive rights of women, girls, and diverse gendered individuals articulated in Article 12.1 and 16.1e of this Convention. This is one of the reasons that Canada has chosen to open its doors to individuals from the United States requiring access to reproductive health services, including access to safe abortion services, whose human rights to choose and make decisions in relation to their own bodily autonomy have now been criminalized in some U.S. states as a result of the Supreme Court ruling in Roe versus Wade, and in spite of Canada's own challenges, ensuring that all individuals have the ability to access this right in our own country. Madam President and colleagues, research clearly illustrates that limiting access or criminalizing reproductive health services, including access to safe abortion services, does not stop individuals from having abortions, but as noted by the UN Women's Rights Committee, results in unsafe abortions with the prevalence of maternal mortality and morbidity. I urge the OSCE participating states who are signatories of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women and those who are not, to heed the calls of the UN Women's Committee to not limit access or criminalize reproductive health services, including safe abortions. We must uphold, respect, and protect the human right to reproductive freedom and the bodily autonomy of women, girls, and diverse gendered individuals. I echo the UN Women's Committee that, in quotes, forcing women to carry a pregnancy to full term involves mental and physical suffering amounting to gender-based violence against women and, in certain circumstances, to torture or cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment in violation of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. Abortion rights are human rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lea Gassan. Next speaker is Mr. Mukita Potrayev, Ukraine. He will be followed by Ms. Pauline O'Reilly from Ireland. Mr. Mukita Potrayev, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Madam President, distinguished colleagues, dear friends, let me start with words of thankfulness for British Parliament, for Birmingham authorities, for Secretariat of OSCE PA, for all teams that organized and provided for us this important and perfect event. Let me also thank, of course, everyone who has voted for my candidature for Vice President of OSCE PA. At the same time, I understand that it's not due to my personal merits. It's an honor that parliamentarians from OSCE states give to Ukrainian soldiers that this very moment are defending democracy and freedom, not only for my country, but for all nations of civilized world. Dear colleagues, your trust is very important. However, what is even more important for me personally, and I guess for all of us, it's a question of building new architecture of our common security. Because, as we all know, that old models and approaches to security are dead. They were burned together with thousands of civil Ukrainians under phosphorus bombs in Mariupol. They were blown up together with women and their children at the railway station of Kramatorsk. They were raped, tortured, and shot in Bucha. They were exploded in shopping mall of Kremenchuk. They were killed together with ordinary people who were sleeping in their flats and houses in Odessa, Kiev, and other cities, towns, and villages all around Ukraine. But what could be this new architecture of security? I guess nobody can give a clear answer for now, neither politicians from honorable parliaments nor experts from prominent think tanks. But what we can start with is principles that should be put in the fundament of this building. Respect. Respect to internationally recognized borders. Respect to independence and territorial integrity. Respect to cultures, traditions, and languages. Respect to human rights and freedoms. Trust. Trust between countries with a goodwill to create, develop, and strengthen political, economical, and humanitarian relationships between free and democratic nations. Strength. Strength of agreements and obligations. Strength of international law. Strength of state institutions, non-governmental organizations, and civil societies. How could the building of our common security become so dilapidated? Maybe because the last 30 years, too many men and women thought mostly about profits, revenues, comfort, and calmness. And who can blame us? We're just people. Maybe because we agreed with too many alternatives to old and banal values.
Speaking time is ended.
We agreed with alternative truth, with alternative democracy, with alternative sovereignty. That's why today we have to fight for the things that don't have any alternatives, for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Thank you. Sorry that I took some more time.
Thank you, Mr. Mikita Potorayev. We are all with you. Next speaker on my list is Ms. Pauline O'Reilly, Ireland, followed by Mr. Vasil Bolea from Moldova. Ms. Pauline O'Reilly, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. President. Firstly, let me give a heartfelt support from Ireland to Ukraine. The conference has correctly given due weight to the invasion and the atrocities in Ukraine and the other huge issue of our time, climate collapse. Given the limited time, I wanted to take the opportunity to raise an issue threatening local stability on the island of Ireland and between Ireland and the UK. It pains me to do so, given how well our friends from Britain have looked after us this week, but I think it's important. I grew up in a time of conflict on our island with news of bombs and shootings daily. That time is behind us. Fragile peace was restored through the Good Friday Agreement, and we have had, until recently, an excellent relationship with our neighbours, the UK. And more recently, between the UK and the EU, agreement was also reached in relation to Britain's exit from the EU, and it put peace in Ireland at the core. It is unacceptable, therefore, that the UK government has now begun to take unilateral action which undermines our agreements, peace, and the economic stability of Northern Ireland. The UK government has decided to breach international law rather than engage in dialogue. Let me make very clear that the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill brought forward by the current UK government breaches international agreements with the EU. In fact, the very agreement that brought peace is being used as a weapon with spurious and false claims that the Northern Ireland Protocol breaches the Good Friday Agreement. It does not. It protects and supports it. Despite the UK's act of bad faith, the EU remains open to talks with the UK. Relations between our nations is at a new crisis point, and I ask the international community to encourage dialogue and cooperation, not unilateralism. And I also want to particularly thank the US and the EU for their support for Ireland. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thank you, Ms. Pauline O'Reilly. Let me also remind you, dear colleagues, that voting is opened until 11 o'clock. It's closed sharply 11 o'clock. Next speaker on my list is Mr. Vasil Bolea, Moldova. He will be followed by Mr. Chen Yves Leconte from France. Mr. Vasil Bolea, the floor is yours.
Спасибо
Thank
большое,
you.
госпожа председатель. Уважаемые друзья, год назад в Республике Молдова прошли досрочные парламентские выборы, вследствие которых партия «Действие и солидарность», победившая на выборах, провозгласила курс на глубокие реформы, ключевой из которых является реформа юстиции. К сожалению, провозглашенный курс на реформирование юстиции в Молдове привел к тому, что в нашей стране после 2019 года опять появились политические заключенные. Резонансными делами, имеющими политическую подоплеку, является дело по отстранению генерального прокурора Александра Стояногла. Кстати, сейчас дело Стояногла против Молдовы рассматривается в приоритетном порядке в Европейском суде по правам человека. Уголовное дело, возбужденное против пятого президента Республики Молдова господина Додона, его жены и других членов семьи. Вместо того, чтобы направить свои усилия для того, чтобы для наших граждан наступили хорошие времена, к сожалению, мы наблюдаем усугубляющиеся экономические, социальные, топливные, энергетические кризисы. Инфляция в нашей стране по итогам первого полугодия достигла 30%, и это не предел. Беспрецедентный рост цен на продовольствие, коммунальные услуги, промышленные товары приводит к обнищанию населения и социальному недовольству. Систематические нарушения прав человека, нарушения прав национальных меньшинств, попытки ликвидации Таракилийского болгарского университета и других учебных заведений, считаю, что должны стать объектом пристального внимания со стороны Верховного комиссара ОБСЕ по правам человека, а также Верховного комиссара ОБСЕ по правам национальных меньшинств. Конечно же, все мировое сообщество обеспокоено событиями, происходящими в соседней Украине. Военные действия, которые начались в Украине 24 февраля, затронули и нашу страну. Хочу сказать, что с первых дней начала конфликта Молдова предприняла все усилия для предоставления помощи и убежища беженцам. До сих пор Молдова приняла более 400 тысяч беженцев, а более 80 тысяч сейчас находятся на территории нашей страны. На сегодняшний день в вопросах безопасности, к сожалению, власти нашей страны предпочитают начать вооружаться, вместо того, чтобы на дипломатическом уровне укреплять нейтральный статус Республики Молдова. С момента провозглашения на конституционном уровне принципа нейтралитета Молдова до сегодняшнего дня, опять же, к сожалению, не предприняла достаточных усилий по признанию этого нейтрального статуса международными организациями, коими являются ООН, ОБСЕ и другие, а также в двустороннем порядке со странами, соседями и партнерами нашей страны. В конце хочу сказать следующее. Уважаемые друзья, Молдова является миролюбивой страной. Мы не собираемся и не хотим ни с кем воевать. Также не хотим, чтобы наша страна использовалась в качестве полигона, где великие державы меряются силами. Хочу в конце пожелать успеха всем делегатам Ассамблеи. Спасибо за внимание.
Thank you, Mr. Vassal Bolea. Next speaker is Mr. Chen Leconte from France. He will be followed by Ms. Mirgual Temirbaeva from Kyrgyz Republic. Mr. Chen Leconte, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Merci Madame la Présidente, mes chers collègues. Durant cette session, nous avons condamné, nous avons déploré, nous avons marqué de la compassion pour les crimes de guerre, les crimes contre l'humanité qui ont été commis par la Russie à Boutcha, à Borodianka, à Mariupol et ailleurs en Ukraine. Malheureusement, il y a aussi d'autres zones du monde, et je pense à la Corne de l'Afrique, à l'Afrique centrale, au Yémen, où ce type de crimes se déroule. Aucun de ces crimes ne doivent rester impunis. Aucun criminel ne doit pouvoir se promener en liberté, passer ses vacances ou faire ses courses dans nos pays. Je crois qu'ici, nous devons en prendre l'engagement. Il existe pour cela un outil, c'est le traité de Rome qui établit la Cour pénale internationale. Prenons l'engagement qu'en revenant dans nos pays, nous inciterons nos autorités et nos parlements à ratifier et à mettre en œuvre cette convention. Trop de pays, et je pense aux plus gros et aux plus importants d'entre eux qui sont dans notre organisation, n'ont pas ratifié ce traité pour l'instant. Cela ne peut pas durer. Nous avons tous du travail sur ce sujet. La France, qui a ratifié ce traité en 2000, n'est pas mis en œuvre correctement chez nous, et nous devrons, au cours des prochaines semaines, revenir sur ce sujet de manière à ce que la compétence du juge français puisse être plus facilement mise en œuvre face aux criminels de guerre et aux crimes contre l'humanité. Mais nous ne pouvons pas, aucun pays de cette organisation ne peut continuer à condamner ces crimes par la parole, sans rien mettre en œuvre pour que des procédures judiciaires adéquates soient mises en œuvre partout dans nos pays. Le traité de Rome doit être ratifié par l'ensemble de nos pays et mis en œuvre dans des conditions correctes.
Thank you, Mr. Chen Leconte. Next speaker is Ms. Mirguel Temirbaeva from Kyrgyz Republic. She will be followed by Mr. André Coelho Lima from Portugal. Ms. Mirguel Temirbaeva, the floor is yours.
Спасибо, госпожа председатель. Позвольте мне выступить на русском языке. Уважаемые коллеги, позвольте мне от имени делегации парламента Кыргызской Республики приветствовать председателя комитета, докладчиков и всех приглашенных гостей сегодняшнего летнего заседания. Выражаем признательность нашим коллегам из Великобритании и официальным представителям Бирмингема за гостеприимство и прекрасную организацию ежегодной сессии. Уважаемые коллеги, хотелось бы обратить ваше внимание, что свобода СМИ в Кыргызстане – это предмет особой гордости нашей страны. Не существует никаких препятствий для их свободной регистрации и функционирования. Отсутствует какая-либо государственная цензура. В 2021 году по рейтингу свободы слова Международной организации «Репортеры без границ» Кыргызстан занял 79 место из 180 стран и улучшил свой рейтинг на 19 мест по сравнению с 2018 годом. В этом плане наша страна занимает лидирующее место в регионе. В Кыргызстане люди через социальные сети также свободно выражают свои мысли и мнения. Кроме того, в столице и других городах регулярно проходят митинги по разным социальным проблемам. Для подобных демонстраций и митингов муниципальные власти создают все необходимые условия. В то же время есть некоторые пробелы, которые требуют устранения и усовершенствования. Мы продолжим неустанно работать над построением современного демократического общества. Выражаем готовность к укреплению сотрудничества с Офисом представителя ОБСЕ по вопросам свободы СМИ, в том числе по вопросам дезинформации и фейковых новостей на страницах социальных сетей. Уважаемые парламентарии, с первых дней обретения независимости Кыргызская республика избрала сложный и долгий путь построения истинно демократической страны, перехода на демократическую форму правления. В современной истории государственности мы уже пережили 3 революции – в 2005, 2010 и в октябре 2020 года. Как показывает жизнь, они укрепили в нас убежденность в важности построения суверенного, демократического и правового государства. В 2021 году мы смогли провести выборы президента.
Madam, time is run out. Thank you.
Okay. Выражаем надежду на неизменную поддержку ОБСЕ и партнеров в данном направлении. Спасибо всем за внимание.
Thank you, Madam Mirgul Temi-Papaeva. Next speaker on my list is Mr. André Coelho Lima from Portugal. He will be followed by Mr. Andrei Miftord from Romania. Mr. André Coelho Lima, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President and dear colleagues. We are all facing an atrocity we thought to be impossible to happen in the 21st century. An invasion from one country to another between 2 OSCE member states. We sit watching lives being taken, children dying, many innocent lives lost for no reason, or better yet, for an imperialist reason. All of us like to help in any way, but it's difficult to know how. And a special word here for Mikita and his magnificent intervention. I think that until the 24th February, we all thought that the concern for the human being was above all national projects and intentions. Unfortunately, that is still not true. It is true for most of our countries, but it is not true for an autocracy like Russia, the largest country in the world. That being said, we all condemn Russia and its actions without shadow of doubt. But beside this unanimous condemnation, don't we think that OSCE, especially OSCE PA, could have a greater and more decisive role, given that OSCE is, as we know, the only organization besides the United Nations that gathers Russia and Ukraine, as well as the European Union countries and the United States? Saying in another way, wouldn't our role be more useful maintaining all OSCE countries within the organization? Despite our unanimous condemnation, wouldn't we be more helpful to Ukraine, debating and arguing with Russian MPs rather than just not having them here. It would, of course, be a very difficult debate. Maybe it wouldn't take us anywhere, but at least we tried. And that, given OSCE's particular circumstances, we should do. And also, looking at the theme of the supplementary item proposed by Farah Karimi, Portugal thinks we should try a more political and less diplomatic approach for the war in Ukraine, in order to involve the international community, in order to involve young people. I'm going to end in a minute, in a second. In order to involve young people and youth organizations in a global movement, a peace movement. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Andrei Coela Lima. Next speaker is Mr. Andrei Miftor, Romania. He will be followed by Ms. Maka Botchoresvili from Georgia. Mr. Andrei Miftor, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President, dear colleagues. We have condemned the unjustified and unprovoked Russian aggression towards Ukraine, as we are all aware of the gravity of this military and humanitarian crisis. But I strongly believe it is also our responsibility to facilitate cooperation in order to find optimal ways of solving not only the war-related issues, but also its worst effects. We are familiar with the effects of the rising energy prices that affect us all, but there is also a new issue on the rise caused by the Black Sea blockade, Ukraine's inability to export the grain and fertilizer on which so many countries depend. As you are well aware, there is a blockade on all major Ukraine ports. Many African and Middle Eastern countries depend on the grain shipments from this area of the world. If we don't act now, people in vulnerable situations in these areas will be in very dire straits soon. We need to keep global trade of food and fertilizer operating as frictionless as possible and not exacerbate the trade bans for these vital commodities. We need to facilitate efficient transport for Ukraine carriers by offering alternative routes for grain exports from this country, including through Poland to the Baltic Sea and through Romania's port of Constanța to the Black Sea. We need to plan and fund the modernization of the freight transport over railways in Ukraine to solve the railway gauge difference issue. We need to facilitate military escorts for such shipments through the Black Sea and up to the Mediterranean Sea. If it's not easy for Turkey to allow a continuous flow of military escorts from the NATO allies through the Bosphorus due to the Monroe Convention, I call upon our Turkish and Bulgarian allies to work together with Romania in order to facilitate and secure Ukraine's grain transport from this area. Food and fertilizers must have unrestricted access to the world markets without direct and indirect impediments. The last thing we need is a new global-scale Holodomor, followed by mass migration at a level not seen before in human history. I thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Andrei Moftor. Next speaker on my list is Ms. Maka Botchoresvili from Georgia. She will be followed by Mr. Johannes Koskinen from Finland. Ms. Maka Botchoresvili, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, it has been decades since Russia's aggressive policies in our region have not allowed us to escape war, destruction, the taking of innocent lives, forced displacement, and violation of international order. Georgia has repeatedly experienced Russia's aggression and continues to fight against Russian occupation and painful consequences even today. Unfortunately, only after full-scale invasion of Ukraine has the world realized that the more robust actions are needed to deter aggression in our region. We are being punished only because we dare to think about defending our freedom and sovereignty. We have been fighting for European integration since the very first days of independence, and with the signing of the association agreement with the EU in 2014, created a solid ground for the way forward. Throughout the past 8 years, we have steadfastly focused on implementing this agreement, knowing that only reforms will transform our country and make it compatible with the European Union. The progress we have made during these years is tangible and undeniable. It is that the reforms that have made Georgia an attractive destination in many ways, despite the security challenges the country faces. On 23rd June, the European Council made an important decision in granting EU membership perspective to Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. But according to this decision, Georgia, unlike Ukraine and Moldova, is not yet a candidate country. While we congratulate our Ukrainian and Moldovan friends with this historic achievement, we also believe that there was no reason for the EU to approach Georgia's application differently. And we hope this decision will be revised before the end of the year. We remain committed to continue effectively implementing reforms that will advance Georgia's path towards further European integration, bringing us closer to our ultimate goal. In this regard, we need the support of our strategic partners, together with an understanding threats we face and vulnerabilities. We have no security umbrella in these very challenging times. We still face Russian occupation and military presence, which is neither legal and nor justified. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Makabacherisvili. Next speaker is not Mr. Johannes Koskinen. It's Mr. Selami Altinok from Turkey. He will be followed by Ms. Victoria Kinshburska from Ukraine. Mr. Selami Altinok, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Sayın Başkan, affınıza sığınarak Türkçeden İngilizceye tercüme yapıldığı için biraz zamanınızı alacağım. Türkiye, bölgesinde barış, istikrar ve refah arzu etmektedir. Bu bağlamda Kıbrıs'ta iki eşit halk ve iki ayrı egemen devlet temelinde çözüm zamanı gelmiştir.
Madam President, dear colleagues, Turkey wants peace, stability and prosperity in the region. And now it's time for a solution on the basis of two equal peoples and two separate sovereign states in the island of Cyprus.
Ayrıca Türkiye uzun zamandır PKK, YPG, PYD, DAEŞ gibi birçok terör örgütüyle mücadele etmektedir. Bu terör örgütlerinin bazı ülkelerde propaganda, eleman ve finansman temini faaliyetlerini hiçbir engelle karşılaşmaksızın yürüttüklerini üzülerek görmekteyiz. Terörizm herkes için aynı değerde, aynı önemde olmalıdır.
Turkey has been fighting a number of terrorist organizations such as PKK, YPG, PYD and ISIS for many years. We regret to see that these terrorist organizations are given free rein to carry out their propaganda, recruitment and financing activities in some countries, but we must attach the same importance to our efforts against combating terrorism.
Ayrıca Türkiye düzensiz göç baskısını ağır şekilde hissetmektedir. Maalesef bazı Avrupa Birliği ülkelerinin göçmenlere yönelik geri itme gibi insanlık dışı uygulamalarına tanık oluyoruz. Türk makamları geçtiğimiz 2 yılda Ege Denizi'nde 34.000 göçmeni kurtardı.
Turkey is a country that feels the pressure of irregular migration heavily. This challenge requires us to observe the human rights of the immigrants and asylum seekers, but unfortunately we are witnessing inhumane practices by some EU countries, such as pushing back migrants. Turkish authorities have rescued 34,000 migrants in the Aegean Sea in the past 2 years.
Son olarak yabancı düşmanlığı dünyanın her yerinde yükseliyor. İslam dininin kutsallarına yönelik saygısızlıkların ve Müslümanlara yönelik ayrımcılığın Avrupa başta olmak üzere nefrete dönüştüğünü görüyoruz.
And finally, xenophobia is on the rise all over the world. We see that the attacks against the holy values and places of Islam and discrimination against Muslims are coalescing into a systematic policy of hatred pursued especially in Europe.
Aşırı sağcı popülist siyasetçiler İslam karşıtı söylemlerini dar siyasi çıkarlar için kullanıyor. Bu durum maalesef Avrupa'da sosyal uyumu bozuyor ve aslında Avrupa'nın güvenliğine zarar veriyor. Teşekkür ediyorum.
Far-right populist politicians increasingly use the anti-Islamic rhetoric for some narrow political interests, and unfortunately this situation disrupts social cohesion in Europe and harms the European security. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Selami Altinok. Next speaker on my list is Ms. Victoria Kinshburska from Ukraine. She will be followed by Mr. Tahir Mirkishvili from Azerbaijan. Ms. Victoria Kinshburska, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Dear colleagues, I came from the beautiful Ukrainian city from the east of Ukraine, Kharkiv. City of science, city of industry, students, universities, but first of all, city of extremely brave people, Ukrainian people. My family and I still live and work there. So what is war for me? war is unknown. Every day, going to bed, I, like thousands of other Kharkiv residents, don't know for sure if morning will come for me. Every day, the inhabitants of our region hear the same terrible sounds. These are strong explosions of rockets and artillery shells flying to our land every day. In the intervals between the air alert, we live and work. War is crippled human destinies. Many people living in Kharkiv need help. War is a colossal destruction. Every day, more than 4,000 destroyed apartment buildings of civil people. Every day, Kharkiv is under the massive attacks from Russia. Kharkiv is being systematically destroyed day by day. The day I boarded the train from Kharkiv for this trip, there was a heavy shelling of a residential area next to my office. 9 people were killed, 22 of them 5 children were injured. War is fear of explosions when you understand that your house, which you consider as a fortress, is in danger of falling over like a house of cards. War is grief of parting with family and friends. War is death. I felt her breath when I was in the city center at the moment when Russian missile Iskander hit into it. I call each of you in this room to contribute to helping Ukraine. We do need help, timely help. But despite all, every Ukrainian believes that tomorrow will surely come, and Ukraine will definitely win. Thank you for your attention. Slava Ukraini!
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Victoria Kinch-Borska. Next speaker on my list is Ms. Tahir Mirskaili from Azerbaijan. He will be followed by Ms. Yvonne Jones from Canada. Mr. Tahir Mirskaili, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dear colleagues, today our world is facing a number of serious challenges, including energy crisis, food insecurity, food prices, food crisis, climate change, and severe disruption in supply chains. In addressing these challenges, the international community, including us parliamentarians, should take decisive joint actions. However, for that we need a stable political environment, free of conflicts and confrontation, which would be conducive into cooperations. Otherwise, all our efforts will be in vain. When it comes to our region, ending the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan opens huge perspective for whole regions. As you know, Azerbaijan is playing a crucial role in energy security of the European Union. At the same time, due to war in Ukraine, the role of the middle corridor of goods transportation, which cross our region, is rising every day. Dear colleagues, the world is very integrated now. Any conflicts in anywhere affected us immediately. Conflict in Europe affects Africa, conflicts in Africa affects Europe. Every conflict increases the price of food, energy, and the life also. That's why we have to act proactively, not to wait to condemn the conflicts post factum. The future fate of the world is depending on every person. That's why we have to take this responsibility. I want to wish the success all the members of our Parliament Assembly. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Tahir Mirskaili. Next speaker on my list is Ms. Yvonne Jones from Canada. And after that, we will take a break on the speakers list and return after the adoption of the Birmingham final declaration. So, Ms. Yvonne Jones, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you to our host country and the team of Birmingham for your kindness and hospitality. As the unprovoked Russian invasion of Ukraine reaches its 133rd day of unwarranted military force, Ukraine stands in defense of its people and country, pushing back on the atrocities of Russia. As OSCE PA preliminary comes to a close, I want to send strength to our Ukraine colleagues that we've heard from this morning and over the last few days, and to their country peoples as they continue to fight back and defend democracy, knowing the sacrifice of their courage, yet their only path to the freedom of tyranny. Canada stands with you in solidarity, as do our allies. At this conference, we speak of climate change, its growing impact we know poses direct challenges to our national security. It impacts critical infrastructure, economic security, and it impacts Indigenous populations disproportionately, disrupting livelihoods and cultural practices, leaving Arctic peoples at greater risk. NATO leaders have described climate as a threat multiplier, recognizing it aggravates poverty, resource scarcity, and intensifies conflict and security. Climate change is a security and defense issue, just as it is an environmental issue. Canada will host a NATO Centre of Excellence in Climate and Security. We would like this centre to be a hub of climate and security solutions for the benefit not just of Canadians and North Americans, but for all our allies and partners. As governments around the world, we can mitigate the threat on several fronts by taking action, including reducing GHG emissions, investing in climate change adaptation and resilience, reforming governance systems that are not equipped to deal with climate, and most importantly, by standing in solidarity with each other. So we are bearing witness to the challenges that face us with climate in the Arctic and around the world. So we must continue to take the action that is needed to reduce the environment and to protect the safety and security of all our countries. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Yvonne Jones. And now I will leave
Canadian plight.
the speakers list, and there is 9 speakers remaining. And now let's go further on the agenda. The next point is the adoption of the Birmingham Final Declaration. And we will now consider the draft Birmingham Declaration, which consists of the final resolutions from each of the 3 general committees, together with the supplementary items referred to the general committees and the plenary, which were considered by the drafting committee yesterday. Mr. John Whittingdale chaired the drafting committee in accordance with paragraph 3 of Rule 39. The drafting committee produced this draft declaration and draft resolution of the Assembly, as well as the preamble. There are some minor technical changes in the text before you put. There are no changes of substance in anything the drafting committees has done on our behalf yesterday. Under paragraph 2 of Rule 39 of Rules of Procedure, no further amendments can be proposed at this stage. First, we will note the resolutions passed by each of the 3 general committees. Then we will take the supplementary items that we send to the committees. We will now consider the draft declaration. If there is any objection to a paragraph, only the following may speak. First, 1 speaker against the paragraph. Second, 1 speaker in favor. And thirdly, the rapporteur or the chair. So I will now go to the draft declaration. First committee. We will now take the preamble and the paragraph 1 to 37 of the draft declaration. Does anyone want to a separate vote on any of these paragraphs? I don't see so. So now we will take the preamble and the paragraph 1 to 37 together. Any objections? No. Adopted. The preamble paragraphs 1 to 35 are agreed to. Draft declaration, second committee. We will now take paragraph 38 to 116 of the draft declaration. Does anyone want a separate vote on any of these paragraphs? I don't see so. So we will take paragraph 38 to 116 together. Any objections? No. Thank you. Paragraph 38 to 116 are agreed to. Draft declaration, third committee. We will now take paragraph 117 to 175 of the draft declaration. Does anyone want a separate vote on any of these paragraphs?
Madam Chair?
Yes, please. Let's see. Yes, I see. Further down, please, sir, the floor is yours.
Yes, I would request a separate vote on paragraphs 166, 167, and 168.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam. A separate vote has been requested on paragraph 166 to 168 by the United States of America. To save time, I will take these paragraphs together. First, does the Assembly again agree to the paragraph 117 to 165? Any objections? No, these are agreed. We now come to paragraph 166 to 168. You have the floor for 1 minute to oppose the paragraph. Does anyone want to oppose the paragraph? Please raise your card. Yes, I was asked here that Madam from United States of America requests the floor. The floor is yours, Madam.
Rise to not oppose, but to support very strongly, but to add my comments very quickly. Yesterday, the United States, Norwegian, and Lithuania delegations hosted a side event on political repression in Russia and Belarus. Let me stand clearly. We have our friends and neighbors locked up in jails in Belarus and in Russia. We must, and we did hear at the time of the powerful testimonies of people like Evgenia Karamoza, wife of Russian political prisoner Vladimir Karamoza, and Belarusian political exile Natalia Kalina, who was arrested numerous times in Belarus. And we learned about the political prisoners, hostages like Brittany Griner, and of course Paul Whelan. As reflecting on this very moving and prominent event, I wanted to propose that we had an oral amendment to condemn the politically motivated imprisonments and violence that are going to continue on restrictions on free movement, and the kidnapping and murdering, the kidnapping of over 250,000 Ukrainian children and murdering of Ukrainian children by Russians. I believe this body particularly should highlight these events and the crisis state-sponsored hostage-taking, and I ask that we go on record of standing against and having these individuals released, including Olympians like Brittany Griner. They will take your citizens as well. We must work for freedom of all unjustly detained
Madam,
in OSCE
time
region.
is ended.
And for that reason, I ask for their immediate release, and I ask my parliamentarians to read 166, 167, 168, and go home to demand the release of these political hostages and prisoners. Save our children and save our citizens.
Time is ended.
I yield. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. Unfortunately, I have to say that there is no, at this stage, no possibility to add any amendment to the text. I am sorry to say this. because the issue arises is very important, but there is no possibility to add anything to the text at this stage. Thank you. But if I understood right, you were not opposing the paragraph. You just wanted to make an amendment, and that's not possible. So I ask
Madam
then
President,
if we
I am
can
only
agree
expressing
to paragraph 166. Anybody oppose, against? No. Paragraph
No.
166. Agreed. Paragraph 167. Anybody who wants to speak? No. Let's go for voting. Anybody against paragraph 167? No. The paragraph is adopted. Paragraph 168. Anybody who wants the floor? No. Then we will go for vote. Anybody against paragraph 168? No. The paragraph is adopted. Thank you. And then, now does the Assembly agree to the paragraph 169 to 175? Any objections? Then the paragraphs are agreed. Thank you. We now come to the consideration of the supplementary items from the 3 general committees. In the plenary, we have already agreed the compromise supplementary item on the Russian Federation's war of aggression against Ukraine and its people and its threat to security across the OSCE region. So we will move straight to the next supplementary item. Victims of terrorism. Is the Assembly content to consider the resolution as a whole? So we will take the resolution as a whole. Any objection to the resolution? No. Thank you. The resolution is agreed. The Arctic region. Is the Assembly content to consider the resolution as a whole? I don't see any objections, so we will take the resolution as a whole. Any objection to the resolution? No. Thank you. The resolution is agreed. Effective youth engagement towards secure, inclusive, and democratic societies. Is the Assembly content to consider the resolution as a whole? So we will take the resolution as a whole. Any objection to the resolution? No. The resolution is agreed. Thank you. Code of conduct for members of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. If I please ask you if you can take the discussion on the side, please. Is the Assembly content to consider the resolution as a whole? Yes. So we will take the resolution as a whole. Any objection to the resolution?
No, Madam President.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't notice. Ms.
No.
Vice President Irene Chalambidis,
Yes.
the floor is yours.
I just wanted to say that today, by voting this supplementary item, the resolution, we are taking a huge step towards transparency, accountability, and I want to say a huge thanks to all colleagues here for thinking that this was necessary and they voted for it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vice President. So now we will take the resolution as a whole. Any objection to the resolution? No. Thank you. The resolution is agreed. Implementing the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in the OSCE area. Is the Assembly content to consider the resolution as a whole? I don't see any objections. So we will take the resolution as a whole. Any objection to the resolution? No. Thank you. The resolution is agreed. Accelerating the green energy transition. Is the Assembly content to consider the resolution as a whole? There is no objection. So we will take the resolution as a whole. Any objections to the resolution? No. The resolution is agreed. Thank you. Combating violence against women journalists and politicians. Is the Assembly content to consider the resolution as a whole? I don't see any objections. So we will take the resolution as a whole. Any objection to the resolution? No. Thank you. The resolution is agreed to. The importance of the human dimension in the context of current threats to security in the OSCE area stemming from the Russian aggression against Ukraine. Is the Assembly content to consider the resolution as a whole? I don't see any objection, so we will take the resolution as a whole. Any objection to the resolution? No. Thank you. The resolution is agreed. Ensuring the safety of journalists in conflict zone. Is the Assembly content to consider the resolution as a whole? I don't see any objection, so we will take the resolution as a whole. Any objection to the resolution? I don't see so. Thank you. The resolution is agreed. And by this, we have gone through all the supplementary items. Oh, yes. Ukraine asked for the floor. Mr. Artur Gerasimov, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam President. First of all, we really appreciate the efforts of the Assembly, the efforts of all committees and the efforts of the Secretariat with purpose to prepare this declaration, and want to say thank you for everybody to support in all these resolutions and all these paras. But we need to say that in para 44, there is a technical mistake in the declaration, and we need to put full stop after the words condemning its devastating impact on the environment. Full stop after that, and we need to exclude all the sentence which after that. It was voted on the committee, it was checked with the head of the committee, and the author of this amendment, it was checked with the Secretariat. We kindly ask you to exclude this wording from the para 44. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Artur Gerasimov. And now I will give the floor to Deputy Secretary General Gustavo Payeras. The floor is yours.
Thank you, President. And just to confirm what Mr. Gerasimov just said, there was a technical mistake in this paragraph. We have met this morning with the chair of the committee and with the proposal of an oral amendment, and the correct version, that is exactly as Mr. Gerasimov just mentioned, is already corrected and will be in the final version. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gustavo Payeras. And by this correction, I wonder if we now can go further on to the final vote on the Birmingham Declaration. I don't see any objections. So we will now consider the Birmingham Declaration as a whole. Is there any objections to the Birmingham Declaration as a whole? Yes, I see three delegates raising their cards. I don't recognize you by name, so I will start with the lady down. There is no need. No, it was just, you didn't want to have the floor. No, thank you, thank you. So now it was to raise the card. I was preparing if there was objections, that's why. So now there is no objections, if I understood right, to the Birmingham Declaration. No. Do you agree, dear colleagues, to the Birmingham Declaration? There is no objections. Yes, dear colleagues, you have agreed to the Birmingham Declaration and it's adopted. Thank you so much. But I made a technical mistake here. No. There were no. Yes. Thank you. It's so good to have an advisor from the United Kingdom Parliament on the right side, because they are very content with all the procedures. Thank you. There were no objections, there were nothing. So that concludes our proceeding on the Birmingham Declaration. It's adopted. Thank you. So let's go further on the agenda. And now I will go back to the speakers list. And there is 9 speakers. After the 9 speakers, there is the report of Secretary General, and there is also the result of the election and the closure of the session. So I kindly ask you to stay to the speech of maximum 2 minutes. The first speaker on my list is Ms. Hanna Lichman from Ukraine. She will be followed by Ms. Olivia Agieva from Azerbaijan. Ms. Hanna Lichman, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, Russian aggression against Ukraine is without doubt the biggest security threat to Ukraine and the world. First of all, because the fighting can move to the territory of neighboring countries, as well as because the migration crisis, the food crisis, energy crisis, because of the threat of missiles hitting the nuclear reactors of power plants, or the direct use of nuclear weapons. All this, the desire to stop hostilities and transfer the confrontation to the diplomatic sphere. Dear colleagues, imagine a situation: you are sleeping at your home, and at 5 in the morning, a neighbor rushes into your house. He destroys your house, kills your children, and rapes women. At the same time, he blames you for everything that happens, because you refused to give him your house. This is how the situation looks at the minds of Ukrainians. Colleagues, according to the current research, 90% of Ukrainians can accept only one way to stop the war. This is to win. Otherwise, all the sacrifices, all the sufferings, and all the deaths were in vain. I want you to know it. That's why more sanctions and more weapons. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Victoria Kinchburska. No, I'm sorry, I read wrong. Ms. Hanna Lichman, thank you very much. And now, next speaker on my list is not the person I read before. It's withdrawn. Next speaker is Mr. Vadim Halaychuk from Ukraine, followed by Mr. Pavlov Frolov from Ukraine. Mr. Vadim Halaychuk, the floor
Thank you, Madam
is
President.
yours. Thank you.
Dear colleagues, I would like to thank everyone for the support that we enjoyed here during the sitting of our Assembly, and the support that you're all providing for Ukraine in your respective countries, in your respective parliaments. And the support for Ukraine rests on 3 very important pillars. First, weapons supply to Ukraine. Second, sanctions against the aggressor state, Russia. And third, humanitarian and other assistance to Ukraine. And in that regard, I'd like to draw your attention to the recent conference in Lugano, where very important projects were considered and plans were made for post-war reconstruction in Ukraine. I'm sure that everyone interested will find information that you need in order to provide further instructions to your governments on how to assist Ukraine in that important regard. I also would like to stress the importance of the proposals that our delegation had made earlier on making changes to the rules and procedures. It is obvious that Russia is attacking not only Ukraine, but the world-based rules order. And it's very important that we make everything possible to counter those attacks on international organizations such as ours, and the rules and procedure would be a very good first step. I also would like to draw your attention to very important developments in Ukraine now. Russia has recently declared that there will be referendums on the occupied territories. As this organization is responsible for overseeing elections and referendums in different countries, I think it's very important that we make a very strong statement that those quasi-referendums will not only be seriously considered and any results recognized, but everyone responsible for organizing them and conducting them, their names will be known, and they will be prosecuted for their crimes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vadim Halaychuk. Next speaker on my list is Mr. Pavlo Frolov from Ukraine. He will be followed by Mr. Tural Ganjalayev from Azerbaijan. Mr. Pavlo Frolov, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, it was a sunny day here in Birmingham on Sunday, 3rd of July. All of us worked in committees, debated, attended a reception at the university in the evening. On this day in Ukraine, only in the Donetsk region, the Russian hit a car with 2 children who were fleeing war and death. 4-year-old girl Margarita died in the hospital from severe head injuries. Her 3-year-old brother Mikhailo is still unconscious in the intensive care unit with a terrible diagnosis. Their mother is wounded, and if she survives, she will mourn her losses for the rest of her life. We have been pleased to hear in Birmingham the words of sincere support for Ukraine. However, we need more decisive actions and active decisions from the governments of all OSCE countries. Deliveries of heavy weapons and anti-missile systems, stop the trade and movement of money into and out of Russia, and punish companies that will try to trade with Russia anyway. Diswifting all Russian banks, not only 11. Strengthening of sanctions which should cover all officials, propagandists, their family members, close relatives, and the leadership of the United Russia Party, which fully correspond to Hitler's party. Seize all property belonging to Russia, Russian politicians, oligarchs, their relatives, and use it for forming a reparation fund for Ukraine. It is also necessary to think about, after the victory of Ukraine, how not only to punish Putin and his gang, but also to forever cure Russia's imperial disease aimed at seizing new territories, subjugating or destroying entire nations, and guarantee the safety of its neighbors. An effective solution may be the nuclear disarmament of Russia, depriving it of the ability to hold the whole world hostage. I understand that it doesn't seem very realistic right now, but let's put it on the global agenda. Glory to Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pavlo Frolov. Next speaker on my list is Mr. Tural Ganjalayev from Azerbaijan. He will be followed by Ms. Yevgenia Kravchuk from Ukraine.
Thank you, Madam Chair, dear colleagues.
Azerbaijan has been consistently and constructively promoting the need to turn over the page of conflict and animosity and embark, however difficult it might be, onto the process of reconciliation, normalization of relations, and peace building based on the fundamental principles of international law and the OSCE principles and commitments. This is expressed clearly both in the statements and concrete steps of Azerbaijani side, including in the 5 basic principles that Azerbaijan presented to Armenia as the basis for a peace treaty. The purpose is square and clear: attaining durable and just peace, security, and stability in the region, and making it irreversible. On its part, Azerbaijan will continue undertaking post-conflict rehabilitation, reconstruction, and peace-building efforts, and implementing commitments stemming from the trilateral statements. We will resolutely prevent any destructive steps against this process. We urge Armenia, if this country is genuinely interested in peace and stability in the region, to abandon its attempts aimed at undermining the process of post-conflict normalization of relations and ensure that necessary further steps are taken in this direction. This has no alternative for long-term peace and stability in the region. Armenia should soberly assess the new realities and, instead of repeating its worn-out accusations, out-of-date concepts, Armenia should reciprocate on the constructive offer of Azerbaijan and seize the historic window of opportunity to normalize its relations with Azerbaijan and with other neighboring countries and engage it in post-conflict peace-building efforts based on the 5 principles proposed by us. This will open immense economic opportunities for the broader region, first of all, for Armenia itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tural Gangelyev. Now I will give the floor to Ms. Yevgenia Kravchuk from Ukraine. She will be followed by Mr. Guillaume Defosse from Belgium. Ms. Yevgenia Kravchuk, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, it's my honor to address you again. My daughter Victoria is 8 years old. That's how long the war had been going in Ukraine, since the annexation of Crimea and when it all started in Donbass. A lot of soldiers that are fighting and dying for our independence were teenagers when it all started in 2014. In 2014, with annexation of Crimea, world turned a blind eye on it. And before it turned blind eye in 2008 with war in Georgia and annexation part of this country. That's why the aggressor, Russian Federation, thought that it's a sign of weakness and there is a rule of gun, not a rule of law. And I want to ask you, to address you, do you want your kids to live in such a world, full of uncertainty, when big country with weapons can invade its neighbor? Do you want to pass these unsolved problems to your kids? Me personally, I don't. I want my daughter to live in prosperous Ukraine with intact borders, a member of European Union, and a member of civilized society and civilized world. You'll be living for your home now. There will be summer vacations, but Russian army does not have vacations. They will be killing Ukrainians all of this time. So I ask you to think about it, and I want you to know that we are thankful for your help, and I want you to know that we ask and urge you for further support of Ukraine so we can win. Slava Ukraini!
Thank you, Ms. Yevgenia Kravchuk. Next speaker is Mr. Demesmaeker from Belgium. He will be followed by Mr. Eduard Anganyan from Armenia. Mr. Demesmaeker, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, and just a short statement to say that I'm very happy and pleased that we have shown great unity the last couple of days that we were together here in condemning the aggression against Ukraine. What I want to say is that we will need this unity tomorrow, and we will need this unity the day after tomorrow. And maybe it will not always be easy to keep it. We will need long-time efforts to support Ukraine. And I call upon all of us to make sure that we can deliver this effort also on the long term. I'm thinking about five things. First of all, that we supply them with whatever they need to win the war and to liberate the whole of their territory. Secondly, the humanitarian relief. There's a winter approaching. We will need a lot of efforts. Third, more effective sanctions against the Russian Federation. Fourth, to make sure that there is no impunity and to prepare the persecution of the war crimes committed. And last but not least, planning and funding for a sustainable reconstruction of their country.
Thank you, Mr. Demesmaeker. Next speaker on my list is Mr. Eduard Angandyan from Armenia. He will be followed by the last speaker, Mr. Christian Viginen from Bulgaria. Mr. Eduard Angandyan, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. First of all, I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to those of our colleagues who supported the amendments suggested by our delegation, both in the beginning stage as well as during the voting. Be assured that your principal position is highly appreciated. Dear colleagues, I want to clarify that the Armenian delegation is against the declaration for the following reasons. 2 days ago, this Parliamentary Assembly voted against all the 3 amendments proposed by the Armenian delegation, which would be totally fine had it been the result of a rational debate. But unfortunately, I have the impression that the content of the arguments has been totally neglected, and that it is of little if no importance at all for some delegates. Because how can it be that the OSCE EPA vote against an amendment which emphasizes the importance of the OSCE Minsk Group co-chairmanship, which is OSCE's only tool to mediate and influence the peace process in the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it correctly. The OSCE EPA voted against an amendment which suggests that the OSCE Minsk Group co-chairmanship is not outdated and obsolete as suggested by Azerbaijan. Another strange and unnatural decision was to deny the amendment which stresses the importance of the comprehensive resolution of Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, a formulation which has been literally reiterated by the Minsk Group co-chairmanship as well as by the 3 member states separately for dozens of times. And again, the OSCE EPA votes against its very own executive branch's official position. Amazing, isn't it? And last but not least, shamefully, this Parliamentary Assembly stands out from almost all international organizations, be it PACE, European Parliament, you name it, in that it refuses to address the humanitarian issue related to the 38 prisoners of war, hostages still kept in the OSCE member states' prisons. And based on the votes on the amendments of the 3rd committee, the only conclusion that I can draw is that we don't really care about human rights violations. The one and only question that bothers us is who, in our perception, is violating those rights. From then on, who cares about the people? What a shame. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Eduard Angandyan. And now I give the floor to Mr. Christian Viginen from Bulgaria. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, I ask the floor to extend an invitation. I will be happy to welcome you all in Sofia this October 14th-16th. It is the first event of OSCE EPA to take place in Bulgaria. We have the ambition, together with the International Secretariat and the OSCE EPA leadership, to host an autumn session which will have a substantial contribution to the visibility of the Assembly as well as to the substance of its work. The provisional topic we have proposed is the contribution of parliaments in the OSCE region in facing the hybrid threats of the 2020s, promoting security in the Black Sea region and beyond. Not having the opportunity to meet for quite a long time because of COVID pandemic, Birmingham was an excellent restart which has to find its continuation in Sofia. In addition to the official debates, we hope to make you feel the spirit of Bulgaria, to take back home something from its beauty and culture. If you have any recommendations and ideas, please send them to us in advance. It is your meeting. We are the facilitators. Help us make it a success in all aspects. Looking forward to meeting you all in Sofia soon. I wish you a beautiful summer. And if you allow me, I'd like to ask you something. Let us all pray and act so that in October, when we meet again, there will be no more war in Ukraine. Thank you. And there is a short video that, yeah, it's already starting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Christian. It was a marvelous movie, and we all look forward to go to Bulgaria to get a view of your beautiful country. Thank you so much. Hope to see you in Bulgaria. Thank you. And now, by this is the general debate closed. And we go further on the agenda. Our next point on the agenda is report of the Secretary General of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, Mr. Roberto Montella.
Thank you, Madam President. Nice video. Thank you very much, Christian. I apologize for my voice. I had lots of discussions during these days. It's been a long journey since we last met in Luxembourg, and I'm very pleased to finally be here in person and see you all. It's been very intense 6 days, lots of conversations, lots of discussions. But what a remarkable session this was. Air traffic chaos on the first days, lost luggage, people in sneakers across the galleries, a session in the middle of the most dramatic war, unfortunately, that Europe has seen since the Second World War, 2 delegations sanctioned, a record number of candidates, and we will soon see the results of the presidential and the vice presidential races. Very close races in the committees, actually one even a draw with a draw of ballot, which only happened a couple of times in the history of the Parliamentary Assembly. 706 participants, 238 MPs from 51 countries. I think after 3 years of COVID and lots of video calls, this was a remarkable journey, and I would like to thank you all of you, for being here and for participating in this very important moment, which, as I said at the Standing Committee meeting, I think this is the real soul, the pulse of this Assembly, is that members meet, talk to each other, sometimes talk at each other, but that you create your personal connections in these meetings, in the side events, in the social moments. I think we managed to come back on stage and starting again with the in-person meetings, and of these I'm extremely happy. And I would like to thank our host, the UK Parliament, for making all the arrangements, all the staff that has worked at this conference, the Secretariat, the International Secretariat, international staff and conference team that has organized this event, and in particular Gustavo Pallares. Without Gustavo, this meeting would not take place. Gustavo is the sole and the longest serving and most experienced person in the Secretariat. And if I have the privilege sometimes of reading an Italian sports newspaper at 8:30 in my hotel, is because I know Gustavo is here, he's making sure that the trains run on time and that the Assembly is in good hands. So thank you very much, Gustavo. And of course, through Gustavo, to all the team that has been working on this annual session, those who you see on the podium, those who are behind the scenes, the interpreters, and also our staff who works in the logistics, in the table office, in the documents office. One lesson I've learned from this annual session, and it's that we really need a dramatic reform of our rules of procedures. Yesterday event, of course, was a bit unfortunate. I would like to express my sympathy to Madam President for the difficult situation we have put you in yesterday. It was not easy. The proceedings from the Bureau were giving sometimes mixed signals, and to handle these from the stage, you will appreciate it's not very easy for anyone. So, Madam President, I hope that you understand that all of us here are expressing sympathy to you. It was not easy to go through that yesterday, so you have our full sympathy. I am responsible for the Secretariat of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, and I can say that I am proud to say that this Secretariat is in a very healthy condition. Since I took the responsibility of the Secretariat, and as I said in the Standing Committee, I think I've arrived at the mid-term of my mandates as Secretary General. One can take some stocks. I think I'm very proud of where we have arrived. When I took the International Secretariat, there was we are talking about the rules of the Assembly here, but also in the Secretariat, there were no rules of how you regulate the relations with the staff. There were no financial rules and regulations against which the auditor and the treasurer could check and exercise accountability and transparency on our accounts. I'm proud to say that since I became Secretary General, I've introduced a very stringent rule for the staff, a code of conduct, by the way, that was a request that came from the second committee. I went to the second committee to say that we already have a code of conduct for the staff since 2016, and also financial rules and regulations. I think this is very important for an international organization. It was not the case in 2016. I know that you've heard this speech several times, but I promise you I will bore you more and more times with this speech, because it is very important that you understand that my responsibility was to put this international secretariat, which was run in also a very arbitrary fashion. I've tried to introduce as much as possible level of professionalities that correspond to similar international organizations like the Council of Europe, NATO Parliamentary Assembly, and the OSCE as such at the governmental side. So, on the political side, I think today you've just passed the most important document, our annual resolution, and I'm extremely proud of where this Assembly and where all of you stand on the political scene. We have spoken very clearly on the biggest issue, the war on Ukraine. We have spoken on this issue very clearly since 2014, where we said that there were clear, gross, and uncorrected violations of the Helsinki Final Act. Today, you've said that you condemn resolutely and unequivocally the ongoing, intensified, clear, and still uncorrected violation of the Helsinki Principles. So I think this speaks to itself. I think we will make sure that this annual resolution reaches all the possible ministers. As it is in our rules, we have to inform all the ministers and ministerial council about this resolution, and we will do so immediately. The way forward, I think the Bureau has to meet. I think in Helsinki we will have an event on the Helsinki Plus 50 project, but I think in that occasion I would like the Bureau, the new elected Bureau, to have an occasion for reflection a little bit on what is this Assembly, what are our rules. Before we start to reform the rules, I think we should rethink a little bit of who we are, what we do. Do we need a 6 days annual session? Do we need a long document to be approved? Do we engage in election observation missions or in 15, 16 special representatives with specific dossier? All of this needs to be reconceptualized, and it needs to be done by the political leadership. Those who know, when I was elected in 2015, I said that I am a strong believer of the fact that the leadership of this Assembly belongs to the elected politicians, to the parliamentarians. The Secretariat is here at the service of the elected politicians. So I think the Bureau should meet sometimes, of course, with the help of the International Secretariat, but sometimes in September, and rethink a little bit our old construction and give us the way forward and say, Secretariat, try to draft rules that come in plugging in this new vision that we have for the Assembly. And I think this is a process that, of course, the Bureau will trigger, but then we have to involve as many as possible. All the delegations and all the standing committee will have to be involved. In the spring, we will have election observation missions in Bosnia, Herzegovina, and in the United States for the midterm elections. You've already heard about our winter meeting, our autumn meeting in Skopje. And now, Madam President, a little moment, if you allow me, on a personal note. First, I know at the beginning of the session we paid a tribute to Ilkka Kanerva. I would like to also pay a tribute to Ilkka Kanerva, former president who died this year. Ilkka Kanerva, I served him as a presidential advisor in my former job when I was a staff of the Secretariat, and also he was also the first president I served as the Secretary General. He also gave us at the beginning a kind of a political way forward. He gave us some ideas on what we should do in the next 5 years when he became president, and I certainly hope that the new Bureau will do so now. As you know, and I am in contact with many of you, I've had in these days, and you can hear from my voice, I think at least 200 private conversations with many of you. Many of you are friends of mine, many of you have approached me to give me advice, sometimes criticism, sometimes healthy criticism, sometimes expressing concern. I just want to reassure you that all of these things that I've received are all very well registered. I, of course, do not respond to some of these things unless they are directly addressed at me, but I think there is a need for further clarification. There is a need for increasing the transparency of how the International Secretariat conducts itself, because I can read, when I read the room and outside the room, that there are lots of questions, there are lots of sometimes concerns that are not related to me directly, but they come through me, through friends, through people who want to give me a friendly advice. So I will, from September, launch what I call an hour or 2 hours with the Secretary General, with the Secretariat, I would say, me, Gustavo, and the senior management colleagues, available for secretaries of delegations or interested members to kind of update you on a monthly basis of what are the upcoming activities, what's going on, also what's going on internally in the Secretariat, who is hired, what vacancies are available. I mean, all of these is, of course, available on our website, but sometimes it's good to provide a moment where questions, concerns, criticism, and as you know, I always welcome all of those, are funneled through a proper, let's say, moment where actually in a very transparent manner one can provide answers. With this, I think I will thank the international staff of the Secretariat, who has done a remarkable job here. I'm very proud of the staff that we have both in Vienna and in Copenhagen. It's a body of professional colleagues. They have interacted with many of you. They are the ones who make sure that we can sustain with I would say, commensurate resources of the budget, and I thank the Standing Committee for approving the budget on the first day of this session. But they are the ones who make sure that we can carry out all the activities, the many activities that we triggered. Don't forget that this assembly started from a moment where we were doing statutory meetings and election observation missions and some visits of the President, to a moment where the Assembly does committees on terrorism, committee on the fight, on migration, and the 16 special representatives that we have. So we have exponentially raised our activities. There was a leaflet which showed how many members have actually been involved. There is a 608% increase of members' involvement. It's not only activities, but if before there was let's say, a core group of 20, 30 members who were the ones who were always more participating in activities. Now we have a huge number of MPs who are participating in our events. So of this, I thank you, and I really appreciate your engagement in international politics through the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. And I conclude, as we work very closely also with the secretaries of delegations, which are our counterpart at the Secretariat, in order to provide better service to you. I'm told, and I hope I'm not going to make a faux pas here, that 2 secretaries of delegations are participating to their last official session. It's Gunilla from Finland and Anka from Romania. And I hope this is correct information. So I would like you to come quickly to the stage for a second so I can give you a present, because I see the tellers are already entering in the room and they're eager to give us the election results. So please, Anka and Gunilla, come a second and we can give you a present. Just make a photo. Don't worry, I'm not going to put you on the spot to say something. That's okay. Please come in so that they can see you. Okay, Anka, that's for you. Gustavo. Okay, so we make a photo, Madam President, with all of them.
Please, in the middle. Yes, Gunilla. Oh.
Come closer, okay?
Let me come.
All right.
Okay.
Let's quickly do it. I see the tellers are. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Secretary General. And also thank to Anka and Gunilla for your support to your delegation, which made them be active here. Thank you and all the best. And now let's go further on the agenda. And I must tell you, 12 o'clock is the last time for our interpreters. So I give the floor immediately to the chief teller, Peter Juliensen, because I believe you have a result. No, there is no result yet. So we have to wait. Yes.
Apologies,
Apologies,
Madam President.
What I heard is that the tellers are still counting. This is exciting, isn't it? Who knows what the result will be? I urge all of you to stay in the room. I will not hold a closing speech because that should be when we are ready. I think that's very important. And I will not sit here and filibuster. I say take a short break, but please stay indoors so we can have the result immediately when our chief teller is here. A short break. Thank you. Dear colleagues, please, after the photo here, take your seat. We might have a result. Here is our chief teller taking the podium. Please take your seat, ladies and gentlemen. I give the floor to our chief teller, Peter Juliansen.
I don't think there's any sound on. There's sound on, yes. Dear friends, sorry to keep you waiting, but I promise you this was worth waiting for. First of all, I would like to say a great thanks to the staff of the OSCE Secretariat, but also to the UK Parliament and of course to the ICC building here. Thank you very much for the help. And I will start with the results for the President. Madam Margareta Cederfelt received 113 votes. Mrs. Kari Henriksson received 62 votes. So elected for new President is Margareta Cederfelt. Congratulations. And there were 2 spoiled ballots. And now, ladies and gentlemen, you really have to concentrate. Also because I will probably mispronounce the names. Bear over with me. Irene Chambalidis received 103 votes, and she was voted in as number 1. Mark Pritchard received 93 votes, and he was voted in as number 2. Mr. Pierre-Johan Pons received 85 votes and came in 3rd. Mr. Michael George Lind received 82 votes and came in 4th. Mr. Makata Pukayev received 81 votes and came in 5th. Mr. Christian Vigenen received 78 votes and came in 6th. And number 7 is Darmin, who received 54 votes. And that should be everybody. There were 1 spoiled ballot. So Irene and Pons and Richard, they are voted vice president until the end of the 25 session. And Link is voted vice president until next year's session. That should be the result, Madam President. Thank you. My job is done.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Teller. And now here are delegates who have requested the floor. If I understood right, have the Canadian, a delegate from the Canadian delegation requested the floor. The floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair, and congratulations on your re-election, and congratulations to those who will also be taking office. On behalf of the Canadian delegation, I simply wanted to take a moment to thank the organizers of this session, to the UK Parliament. You've been wonderful hosts, and to all of the staff and everyone involved in putting this on. Thank you so much. We are hosting a brief reception right now, so if anybody has time to join us. We're going to be hosting, as everybody should know, the session next year, the 30th annual session. Our attempt at hosting in 2020 had to be delayed, and so we're going to be very delighted to be entertaining everyone in Vancouver next June 30th to July 4th. And so we have a taste of sockeye salmon and some BC wines for a reception if you have a chance to stop by. And otherwise, we look forward to seeing everyone, and we're very excited about hosting next year in Vancouver, and we hope everybody can make it. Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And now I will deliver a final word before I close the annual session. I will go up to the speaking chair. Thank you. No, it's not possible to hide. It's working.
No, it doesn't.
No. Dear colleagues, first of all, thank you very, very much for your votes and for your trust in me. It means a lot for me. Thank you once again. I would also like to say thank you, Carrie. We have been working together for a very long time, and I appreciate our cooperation, you as a person, and the work you do inside OSCE PA. And I look forward to further cooperation. Thank you. I would also like to say, I know we don't have any interpreters, but I would like to say thank you to the UK Parliament for hosting our annual session. You have been the most fantastic hosts, and I am sure that most of us here, we will remember the dinners, we will remember the great hospitality you have shown us. I would also like to say thank you to the interpreters for the work you have done. It's not easy. We have all different dialects, but you have managed. Thank you. And of course, from all of us parliamentarians, thank you to the International Secretariat. You are always there for us, always providing us. It doesn't matter what time it is, and it doesn't matter what kind of questions. Thank you so much for your support and work, and of course, your knowledge. But I would also, on my personal level, want to say thank you to those persons from UK who have assisted me. A Swedish parliamentarian, I am not used to have somebody who escorts me to the different rooms or to carry my bag or come with a cup of coffee when it feels that it's time to have something to drink. Thank you so much. And also to the policy advisor. Thank you. It's very much appreciated. But I would also like to say thank you for the work we have done here, for the leadership of our 3 committees, for the leadership that is in our 2 ad hoc committees. And I can ensure that it's also will be a lot of work this year for the Committee on Rules of Procedure. But thank you for the work you have initiated so far. We all know from yesterday that your work is needed and appreciated. I would also like to thank you, all dear members who have been active in the debates, who have put supplementary items, amendments on the table, because that's what makes our debates. And also thank you for adopting the final declaration for the Birmingham annual session. But don't let it stop here by being adopted. It's a need to be used. Use it back home in your parliament. Send it to your speakers. Send it to your government. Use it, because if we should have any impact as parliamentarians, it's not only here sitting in our meetings, it's also what we do back home, how we use the knowledge and our decision. So please be welcome to use it. I would also like to say thank you to our dear colleagues from Ukraine. What's happening in the Ukraine, the illegal war that's performed with you. I and some of our colleagues here, we have visited Ukraine, and it was heartbreaking to see. It was heartbreaking to see what goes on, but I am convinced that there will be peace one day, and we will do, all of us here, our best to support you. But I would also say, what I saw at the train, when we were taking the train from Poland, it was astonishing to see the Ukrainians lining up, going back home, all women and men talking about they were needed back home. They were there, ready to go home, to support their country, to do whatever they can for Ukraine's integrity, sovereignty. It was amazing, I must say. But also thank you to the US delegation for raising Vladimir Kara-Murza. Vladimir Kara-Murza is an opposition figure in Russia. And I think he is one of the last free, independent thinker and active political figure. He is jailed now. And let's get united, as Sheila Jackson-Lee said, because we need to support democracy wherever, but also inside our assembly. And I can promise you that this work will continue. It's needed. But we should do it together, so it's something that we all can stand behind. And here, once again, the cooperation with the International Secretariat is important. And I know that Finland have invited us for the Helsinki program. Thank you so much. We all look forward. And also to Bulgaria, who will host our autumn meeting, but as well to Canada for the next summer. And I wish, first of all, my new elected colleagues, I look forward to work together with you. Really forward. We have a lot to do. But I would also like to say thank you to those of you who are not elected any longer. It has been a true pleasure to work together with you because of your dedication to OSCE EPA and contribution to the work. Thank you so much for your work. And by this, I wish you all a happy summer. I hope you can recover and be together with your family, because they look forward to get you home, your dear and close. So thank you, and I wish you all the best once again. Have a nice summer. Our 29th annual session is closed by this. Thank you.